Chapter 1. Prologue, Journey to DxD. Disclaimer. High School DxD is a Japanese light novel series written by Issei Ishibumi and illustrated by Miyama Zero. The Fate series is owned by Type Moon. I do not own any of the characters mentioned from both series. The only things I own are the ideas that popped into my head for this story and whatever original characters I would create for the story. My main muses come from Gabriel Blessing and Marcus Galen Sands, authors of great works themselves. This story is meant to be a work of pure fiction made solely for fun. Constructive reviews will be welcomed, flames will be ignored. Any references to characters in real life are purely coincidental and should not be taken seriously. If I could make money out of my ideas, it would be nice. Root damn it. Published, January 12, 2015. Edited, the 18th of September 2017. Prologue. Journey to DxD. How long have I been walking? How long have I been fighting? How long have I gone on, trudging through battlefields and conflicts, in the hopes of saving as many lives as I could? How long have I been seeking the silent hill of swords and the golden light that awaits for me? Apparently, long enough to find myself standing on a broken slab of rock floating in between the dark spaces of dimensions while fighting against a horde of the undead and its dead apostle creator in front of me. All the while being surrounded by dead bodies and blades skewered into the ground. Yeah. Just your typical day of hunting down ceiling designations, taking down evil villains and saving the world from certain doom. Oh goody. Further thoughts of my wayward life were interrupted by 5 of the undead breaking off from their pack and lunging at me at once, hoping to distract me with their tactics and attack at my weak spots. Quite honestly, they are really stupid. How many times have they used that tactic against me? Have they not seen how many times I have kicked their rotting undead asses to the curb and danced on their graves? Oh well, I can't complain. Stupidity on their part means easier targets for me. Trace on. As soon as those words were uttered, all 5 fell to the ground screaming as the black keys embedded in their heads proceeded to burn their face off, with the fire spreading quickly on their bodies and reducing them into ashes. The others that had held back started to hiss and cursed at the sight of their kind killed. Damn you, dog of the queen, white-haired demon Magus. Counter guardian, Magus killer, blade executor. Shuru Emiya. That's right people. That is my name. I allowed myself a moment to voice that out as I touched a sword from one of the dead bodies and burned the body before pulling it from the ground and rested on my shoulder. Don't wear it out. All of them bristled with anger, only to be held back by the dead apostle who merely raised his right hand to silence them. He was a very different creature compared to them. He had pale skin that would have gone well with that blonde hair extending past his shoulders if not for the throbbing veins that made him appear to have a plant taking root underneath his skin. His eyes were completely black and his lips were a dark shade of blue, evidence of his own transformation into a dead apostle. His clothes were a cross between the clothes normally seen in the 18th century and those in the current time, giving him an unusual appearance but would not look too out of place in the association. This fellow was also the ceiling designation that I was hunting for a few months now. Ranked 6th on the list, this guy was the highest ranking target I have come across so far, and this was backed up by his magecraft that has been beating everyone in his path. Boy. Why do you persist? The ceiling designation spoke for the first time in a long while since we came to this place to fight. Why do you keep interfering in my work? Others I can understand their motives for doing so, but you are a mystery. He said those words in an unusually polite and straight manner that conveyed his confusion to me. A rarity amongst all of those I have hunted down all this time. You should know that your work is the type that could get the whole world in danger. I said as I dismissed some of the swords around me to conserve my energy and to have a more open field around me. Your work in the resurrection of the souls and prana symbiosis was something too drastic for the association to ignore. Not to mention the potential to summon the counterforce if you were to continue such research was too much even for those old coots. And to top that all of, your ability to partially jump through dimensions has put a big target on your back. That I shall not deny. It is unfortunately dangerous work. And my ability is dangerous in their eyes and somewhat valuable considering the similarities to the wizard Marshall. But still you are unusual. He agreed while giving his opinion. No matter how I looked at it, you do not have much of an incentive to come after me. Yeah well. I shrugged while eyeing the undead. I cannot exactly relax while you have your undead buddies going around to attack other people and taking their souls. Maybe the case, however that's the thing I don't get about you. The dead apostle remarked. You keep on coming after me and the others, constantly sending us off to the association to be their lab experiments or to kill us, and for what? The mere promise of rewards. Or the feeling of satisfaction that each successful job deters them from keeping an eye on you? And if not, why do so? To be a hero. To be thanked by those mere humans that do not know the true difference between monsters and themselves. To receive some form of recognition from those nobles who don't even bat an eye for people like us. They will never understand people like you or me. It asked that with a hint of sarcasm and somewhat prudish dismissal. All along, I listened to him, merely listening but not concentrating on his words. But at those last words, I could not help but look at my reflection on the surface of the sword I had in my hand, and after evaluating the situation, allowed myself a mental grimace. I was currently dressed in a black shirt and dark trousers, with white stripes going along the sides, and reinforced with a special thread that acted as body armor of sorts. The dark brown coat I wore on me has holy runes and other symbols that help to repel creatures like the dead apostles and to boost my defenses. Ending that all, I had battle gloves and steel-tipped boots adorned with more holy symbols to protect myself. Now that would be nice, if not for the tears on my clothes and the bloodstains on me and my current facial appearance. Oh, don't get me wrong. I am not the least disturbed about the wear and tear of my clothes, I can always repair them easily. The blood stains from the undead are a pain and the smell even more so, but nothing like super strong detergent, a bit of holy water, and a little elbow grease can't fix. The thing that bothered me was my head reflecting on the surface of the sword. The sight of seeing strands of white at my sideburns, the patches of skin turning dark that made me look like I had been burned irregularly, and one of my eyes that was changing its color to that of steel, was really bothersome. In other words, I was slowly changing into that dreaded root be damned archer. It was shocking to say the least, when Rin and I woke up the next day to be confronted with this sight. I could at least say with confidence that I handled the shock a lot better, if a broken mirror and a few swords nearly stabbing my least liked individuals were of any indication. As for Rin, well, let's just say that we needed to find another apartment 2 hours later and apologize to the entire rune department for cursing them with fully charged ganders. Still, that was the least of my problems, as this guy would no doubt attest. It was true that many would not appreciate my work for the simple fact that I was both an Asian and a mere third-rate magus who was connected to my dad in terms of name and partial legacy, and I was becoming a little too popular for the association's liking. Even if by some small chance you managed to defeat me, what then? You would just hand me over to the association to be in the lock-up, and pray they don't come after you? You who also possess the power that, if I may quote, could get the world in danger, he continued to speak with that unsettling politeness and objectiveness. You of all should understand that once labeled as a ceiling designation, there is no hope for us to escape. It is either to cower in fear while hiding, or to be cut up and stored in glass jars, never knowing if we are truly alive or dead, forever praying for someone to end our suffering. Again, I grimaced inwardly. There was some truth regarding the words he said. It was sometime after I gained the ability to travel between dimensions from Zeltrech and started to hunt this creature, when word got out about my true abilities. Let's just put it as, the results were expected. Translation. Shit just got crazy. The idea that a third-rate mage who could barely use some of the more basic spells, was able to attain a reality marble was something that both galvanized the higher nobles and excited the crazier types at the clock tower. Within 10 minutes of hearing the news, my name went from lowly mage list to the 8th highest of the ceiling designation list. A huge reward was offered to bring me back in any state, just as long as I could still breathe. 3 guesses on their ideas of keeping my head, the first 2 don't count. Anyway, it got to the point that I literally had a few minutes to pack my bag, get into a quick argument with Rin and beat the crap out of the closest group of executors after me, before I could activate the portal that would lead me out of the area. Since then, I have been bouncing back and forth to deliver any other ceiling designations and killing off any dead apostles or undead that I met along my journeys, occasionally checking on Rin discreetly to ensure she was safe. Some of the saner or better mages like Waver were both decent and sensible enough to let me go on with my jobs and to pay me for my services, Not to mention I was confident of Rin's safety due to Zelrich's watchful eye on her. I will give him this. When he has found a potential talent, he keeps an eye out for them no matter where he goes. That was why both Rin and Luvia enjoyed the relative safety and freedom under him without getting attacked by the other magus. Doing so would make them wish they could die a normal death. But in the end, it doesn't change the fact that I could no longer stay with Rin, nor visit Fuji-ne, Sakura, or any of my other friends without bringing some form of danger to them. Many of the crazier mages would have used them to draw me out, without any regard to their lives. That I cannot handle. Why don't you join me, Shuru Emiya? My thoughts were interrupted as I looked at the dead apostle offering his right hand. You may deny your circumstances, but when you think about it, there is not much a difference between you and me. We are both outcasts from the association and those of great power. We are both being hunted down for having powers that could be used to benefit others. Abilities that could potentially save lives, if not for their greed for knowledge and disregard to lives. I believe that is your. What is the word in Japan? Ah yes. Senpai, I can help you get even stronger, strong enough to oppose the association and protect Rin Tasaka. He let out a smile that had just too much sharp teeth to be nice. Will you consider my offer to be my ally? And that is the other thing I don't get about this guy. Most of the ceiling designations, dead apostles and demons I have faced tend to be less polite and more, grab me, bite my throat and suck me dry. Aside from the few female counterparts, most would have gone on to curse me or hurt me in some way. He was by far the only one who genuinely wanted me to join him in some manner. Even when we fought each other a few times in the past, he was unusually courteous in his manner of pointing out my mistakes, not to mention being somewhat understanding for my desire to move to an area with no innocent parties around. He made exceptions regarding the criminals who he took personal pleasure to kill, but otherwise he did not attack needlessly. Furthermore, I have seen his fights with other mages, and more often than not, he held back in defeating them, only expanding the correct amount of strength to do so and only resort to outright destruction when they did something that was, in his view, distasteful, doubly so when said mages have a certain preference for using children as ingredients for their work. And as disturbing as it sounds, I actually considered about his offer a few times when we fought. He was a lot like me in many ways. A third-rate mage who was adopted into a noble family. Someone who wanted to help the world. He strived to complete his research with the same type of frenzied dedication as me, and in the face of opposition, he just kept on going. He did not bother about the hierarchy of the clock tower or the higher nobles, and he would tend to take more risks than most would dare to do so. It was unfortunate that his research took a turn for the worse when he decided to dabble into necromancy and started his work in the resurrection of people to attempt cheating death. His methods were considered too drastic as it was essentially, if I had to give it a proper description, a bastardized version of the Holy Grail system, in which it took souls from the afterlife and forced them into containers. Only problem was that said souls could not be freed from their curse even after the destruction of the body, thus leaving them in a state that would be totally stuck between the living and spirit world, unable to pass on to the afterlife. Not to mention the aftereffects of such a research ended up creating a large number of undead that could spread the virus, potentially upsetting the balance and calling upon the counterforce. As surprising as it sounds, it seemed that even those old coots from the association who would not bat an eye at those who regularly used children as ingredients, conduct inhuman experiments on pregnant women, or even wipe out an entire town for their work, would actually be horrified at this research. Guess the idea of not being able to pass on peacefully was the line of morality for them. I closed my eyes and shook my head slowly and somewhat sadly at him. You know, if we had met any other time in the past, I might have taken up that offer. Maybe we could have been good friends. I opened my eyes and faced him resolutely. But I'm afraid this is not possible right now. I see. The dead apostle also let out a sad smile of acknowledgement as he dropped his hand. It is unfortunate. I would honestly have liked to avoid fighting you and to maybe know you better. Who knows? If you escape this round, let's have some drinks next time. I said as I materialized Kanshu and Bikuya in my hands and ready my stance. The dead apostle also readied his stance as the undead around him started to get more aggressive facing me. But it will be on your tab, okay? I threw in one last wit as I gripped my weapons tighter. He only gave a light-hearted smirk in return. It was time. Let's end this then. The dead apostle nodded before straightening his back and looking at me with a defiant look. My name is Julius Luther Balsforth, the third son of the Balsforth Duke and wielder of the Shadow Creed. State thy name and fight me. For this one alone, I will follow decorum and introduce myself. My name is Shuru Emiya, the son of Kuritsuguru Emiya, the sword magus, the blade executor, and lastly, the second magus killer. With that, I kicked off the ground hard and ran straight at Julius, who quickly sent his minions after me in waves as he held back to prepare his spells. This would need to be handled delicately. I am the bone of my sword. Trace bullet, continuous fire. I conjured more blades behind me and sent them straight at them, taking down most of them and leaving the few that escaped to be introduced to my two blades in my hands, all while shortening the distance between me and Julius. As I took care of my 12th undead, I watched Julius complete his spell and his shadow started to rise up from the ground like some ghastly ghoul and the ends started to sharpen into blades. This was Julius' Shadow Creed, the ability to use his shadow as a weapon. That was a particularly troublesome magecraft he used, as his shadow could be switched between the ultimate lance and the ultimate shield, and its ability to increase its distance using the shadows of either his minions or his territory was a definite headache. Many of the executors sent after him were killed due to that ability. Thankfully for me, I had just the right blade in mind to handle that after our numerous encounters with each other. Break, Clio Soleil. I traced the blade and launched it high in the air, closing one eye and using Byakuya to block the glare resulting from the explosion and saving myself from the brightness that blinded Julius and the undead. More importantly, the resulting heatwave burned off most of the undead forces and forced back the shadow that Julius sent at me. As soon as the light faded off, I quickly opened the other eye and made a beeline for Julius. Before he could fully recover, I raised Kanshu and cut off his right arm. Gah! He directed a small part of his shadow to cover the wound while commanding the main body to attack me, forcing me to backtrack and maintain a safe distance from him. Julius used this opportunity to stab a few of the corpses near him with the shadow and break them apart, gathering them near the wound so that the shadow could force the pieces into it and form a semi-deformed arm that was darker in color, with strands of shadow peeking from the gaps like dark tentacles. Oh great, just freaking great. I grumbled mentally as I readied my stance again. That was the other troublesome aspect of his shadow and also related to his research. By using the undead as his replacement flesh and the shadow as his binder, he could effectively replace his body parts as many times as needed. Thankfully he can't heal immediately as the body takes a while to recognize the new parts and assimilate it properly. And that was when the second part of the plan kicked in the form of an exploding sword right next to him. Boom! With that, his newly repaired arm became a newly amputated arm that flew in the air and vanished in the dark reaches of the dimension gap. TCH. Julius let out a sound of irritation as he raised his arm to cast a different spell. Halflam. Oh shit. I barely had time to create a wall of blades before a giant wave of black flames came surging right at me and hitting them with enough force to crush a battalion of soldiers. I did not bother to check if it would hold and just jumped out of the way in time before the black flames flared up and surged over the wall, engulfing them completely. I quickly summoned a few more blades and shoot them straight at him, each one exploding upon hitting his defense of black flames and shadow. When the smoke cleared, it was to find an empty area littered with blown pieces of rock and flesh. Crap, where is he? Your sides are wide open, boy. A voice on my left side was the only indication I got before black blades cut my body deeply. GAHG. I moved away from the spot and quickly fired off a few more blades in the general direction, just in time to see his body pierced by them, only for it to suddenly bend over unevenly like soft clay and changing color, just as a figure emerged from the shadow and formed itself to be his look-alike. I looked around and saw multiple copies of himself popping up from the shadows, surrounding me and cutting off my escape routes. Ah yes, how could I forget my least two favorite aspects of his Shadow Creed? Shadow cloning and shadow teleportation. Oh joy. Doesn't this remind you of our previous 3 fights? The multiple bodies of Julius all talked at the same time, sounding eerily haunting in the setting we were in. Certainly not helped with the black eyes with a notable red gleam present and them smiling with more teeth than some of the 27 apostles I knew. And those guys had a lot of teeth. I traced a few more blades and shot them in all directions, detonating them all at once to clear off most of the clones, with several Clio Soleil to remove most of the shadows as I attempt to seek out the real one. Steel is my body, fire is my blood. I decided to go for broke and create a few dark keys to latch onto some of the shadow to at least restrict them temporarily, before calling forth a sword of crimson flames into my hands. Reduce all to ashes, Surtur. I stabbed the flaming sword into the ground, forming a ring of flames around me which spread forward, consuming all the shadow clones and surviving undead in its wake. I ignored the screams of agony and used my eyes to find the real Julius. If I don't end this fight soon, it would be very detrimental for me. It only took a few seconds to find him at the far of the rock slab, and what I saw did not comfort me at all. Standing in a ring of his shadow that served as his barrier from the flames, Julius had all the time he needed to call forth his greatest weapon yet, a giant spear that was swirling with black shadows and black flames, with red streaks of electricity arching from its surface. It has been quite a while since anyone pushed me this far, Julius said as he raised the spear to aim at me. Honestly, I should be feeling angry for losing an arm, yet I feel extremely happy to be fighting you. This is a strange feeling. Yeah, just to let you know, I am straight. On to more important matters then. I am currently running low on prana due to fighting this fellow for the past few hours now, and I'm not sure if I am able to return home with my current level. But if I don't stop him now, things will get very hairy and Rin might get hurt. Guess there was only one thing left to do. Keeping my left hand on Surtur, I brought my right hand to the side and concentrated hard. I have created over 1,000 blades. Trace. On. I had spent a short time with Saber, and through our talks and shared memories, I was able to get a glimpse of many of the weapons in her past. Normally I would try to create Excalibur and just blast him to oblivion, but that was if I was at full capacity to begin with, and even then I was uncertain if that might work. So I went for the next best option of sabers, Caliburn, the golden sword of assured victory. Beautiful. Julius praised as I tightened my grip on the blade and directed the tip at him. In a way, I can understand why the association would want to capture you. Creating all those noble phantasms so easily would make you one of the rarest magus out there, and that blade has a great deal more power than any of the others you have used against me. Julius narrowed his eyes as he looked at me. By chance were you holding back on me? Well, you know heroes have to keep at least one trump card hidden for the final showdown. I let out my own mischievous smirk. Technically I have a few more trump cards, but he did not need to know them. Ha 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 ha. Julius let out a laugh as he smiled widely. You are a really strange man. Pouring more prana into his weapon, he held the spear like a jousting lance and directed the tip right at me. So shall we end this? I took Caliburn in both my hands and raised it high, pouring all my available prana into the sword and making it glow very brightly in the darkness. Its light and warmth reminded me greatly of Saber during our final moments together before we went to take down the Grail. Looks like I'll be seeing you sooner than expected, Saber. The flames curved and bellowed as both of us rushed forward without hesitation, the resulting leakage of power from our weapons causing the rock around us to crack and split from the ground. Despite the relatively short distance, it felt like an eternity, seeing Julius coming at me with the demonic spear of flame and shadow, knowing that failure would mean certain death. Gott Toten. Julius bellowed as he threw back his arm to throw the spear. In response, I took my blade to the side and raised it to my right side. Ca. Damon Lanze. Julius thrust his arm forward to pierce my body. Too bad he was a second slower. Liburn. I took one more step and brought the blade down, shooting out a prana burst that collided with his weapon, generating a small ball of light and energy that swirled unevenly. Then with a loud explosion, the ball expanded, engulfing all of us in its light and blasting us off our feet. Idly as I soared through the air, I had a sudden image of Rin and the others back home. Sorry guys. Looks like I'm not able to come back for New Year's celebration. Ow. Ow. I groaned as I steadily raised my head from the ground, wincing from the throbbing pain that was making me see double. For a while I used one of my hands to steady my head and take a few deep breaths until my eyes could see straight. I looked at both my hands in disbelief before looking down at myself. I thought I should be dead by now, considering that explosion. The fact I was still bleeding red and the prana inside was my own meant I was still human. But man, that was a rush. Well, I guess this is it for me then. I turned around quickly and took in sight of Julius. And boy, what a state he was in. He was currently strewn on the ground, resting against a jutting rock that came up from our fight. His legs were completely blown off and his remaining arm looked like it was ready to fall apart any second now. His clothes was burned off to reveal a very charred torso and scars from the fight. His face was partially burned off from the left side, with its eye looking like an eggshell that was broken and leaking its sick fluids. The right side of his face was the only part which remained relatively intact, and that eye was looking at me unsteadily. Now that was a fight. Julius gave a somewhat strained smirk as he wheezed heavily. It seemed he took a lot of damage internally as well to be breathing erratically. I slowly stood up and took stock of the situation around me. Outside the battle zone, the small handful of undead that survived the onslaught stood silently and staring at me with their cold eyes. Need not worry of them. I turned back to Julius, who attempted to put himself in a better position. They will not attack you for now, unless you do something to provoke them. Thanks. I replied as I slowly stood up and dusted myself a little. Julius let out a weak chuckle at my seemingly ignorant state. Truly, you are an unusual mage. Normally others would either be running their asses off or be overjoyed at the prospect of cutting my head by now. Yeah, well, I have often been told that I was a total idiot for many things, I remarked as I straightened myself up. And for your case, the fact that you did not command them, I jabbed my thumb at the undead, to come for my neck means you have something else in mind. That is true. Julius gave a weak nod. At least I get to have a good fight. Same here. I paused before asking, this may seem like a weird question at this point, but you are not a true dead apostle, are you? Oh. Julius let out a sound of amusement. Now what brought this on? Has our fight seemed that unusual to mistake me? I have fought many other dead apostles and undead in the few years I have been with the Association and the Vatican Church. Each one of them had a very distinct feel and smell to them, if I were to say it. I answered evenly. Even the wizard marshal has the overwhelming aura around him that I associate with the strongest of apostles. But for you, I can't detect that much from you. If anything, I would say your core is still human. And that was definitely the case. Typical dead apostles I had faced would have the scent of rotting flesh coupled with another scent that distinguished them from the others. But up till this point, none smelled remotely human like Julius. It was as though he purposely kept a part of his body as a human for some odd reason. Julius looked at me with a hint of pleasant surprise before letting out a rather energetic and remarkably human laugh that echoed in the open area. I guess I really can't hide too much from you. You always seem to know what I am and what I will do in the end. That is one thing, but the other clues stem from your reasons to turn yourself into your current state. You only wish to help others with prana deficiency and those of lesser backgrounds. Not once did you bother to use women or children in your experiments, and you tend to deal a heavy hand to criminals or mages who dishonor your code of ethics. I paused before continuing. But perhaps the biggest reason for your transformation was you wanting to resurrect your wife, wasn't it? She was killed by the one whom you took his life as your first victim, right? In that moment, the part of the face that was not damaged gained back some color, and maybe it was the trick of the eye, but it looked like I was finally seeing the part of him that was hidden all those years behind the mask of a villain. A human soul who wished to get back that small light of happiness to illuminate the darkness it was stuck in. You are really unusual for a magus. You know this, yet you do not try to take advantage of it like the others, and you always seem to hold back against me. Julius gave that cursory stare I had become accustomed to. Why do this? Why, huh? I don't really know why, but I let out a sad smile of my own as the image of a blonde girl came into my mind. A part of me can relate to your reasons, so I wanted to see if you could perhaps find yourself in time. And that is why you are so interesting. Julius shook his head as he let out a weak chuckle. It was clear he did not have much time left. The most I could do was to ease his pain either through words or blade. So what will you with me? Well, you are half dead as it is, and I'll be honest. I do not trust any of those nobles back at the association. Knowing them, if I bring you back, they would probably find some way with your abilities to make your methods look tame. I said in a rather tired and irritated tone. Truly, those fools at the tower have absolutely zero compulsions to do any experiments on anything that could get them closer to the Akasha records. Yes, that is so true. He let out another wheeze before pausing in deep thought. I just realized, you have won this fight, so you deserve a reward of sorts. Don't bother, I waved my hand tiredly. Right now, all I want for a reward is a bathtub with hot water, and maybe a warm meal after that. A warm bed would be a good bonus. Ha ha ha, Julius let out another amused smile as he looked at me. Well, I can't give you that, but I can perhaps give you the next best thing. I barely had time to register when the shadows started to gather around Julius. I instinctively traced Byakuya and Kanshu again and watched his moves carefully. Was he trying to put in one last attack? Relax. I'm not going to attack you, Julius remarked as he watched my moves. I barely have enough strength as it is, and I'm not in the mood to hurt you. He then closed his eyes and took deep breaths as small tendrils sprouted from the shadow and crawled along his body, converging at the wound in his chest. Then with a loud and wet sucking sound, they started to burrow into his body. Kook. He coughed out blood as the tendrils forced their way into his body. Wait, what are you doing to yourself? I took a step forward to him only to jump back as the sharp spears protrude upwards and nearly giving me another hole to breathe through. Apologies, but I ask that you stay back for now. Julius wheezed as he choked on more blood. I may not be able to control my shadows as well as before, so stay away please. I shook my head as I tried to make sense of the situation. Why was he trying to kill himself? Kug. Julius doubled as the tendrils started to get more vigorous in whatever they were doing. With a loud ripping sound, they tore something out of his body. Ki-ya-ya-ya-ya-ya. Julius let out a primal roar of agony that sent chills down my spine, before he braced himself against the rock and threw up more blood. Silently, he conjured up another tendril that appeared with a glass flask filled partially with a green liquid, into which the other tendrils placed the object and sealed it up tight. Catch! With that, the tendril whipped rather lethargically and sent the flask at me. I barely had the time to react, so I nearly fumbled with it when I caught it before holding it tightly. Butterfingers. Julius remarked with a hint of amusement when he saw my reaction to catching it. I ignored his comment and took a closer look. What I saw took my breath away and considerably took the blood from my face. This is. Yup, my magic crest. Julius replied as he clutched his wounds. My parents were along the lines of jerks when they thought of implanting into me the unused and utterly useless bits of magic circuits from the main one, just so they could use me as a guinea pig for adopting what they regard as the worthless magic of the family, while giving their prodigal son the best of the magic crest. Then when they saw how far I have advanced within a year compared to their son, they decided to chop me up and reinsert those circuits in an attempt to get the best for him. I nodded as I recalled the information regarding the family. The Balsforth were one of the intermediate noble classes at the clock tower, meaning they were somewhere in the middle of the social ladder that made them a target at both ends of it. High enough for those often bullied and leeched to hate them, yet low enough for the higher-ranking families to treat them with disdain. It was one of those situations that made the Balsforth take in a relatively weak magus with poor quality to at least appeal to the masses that they were a kind family, all the while giving him a crappy education and even crappier version of their spells by removing what they viewed as worthless circuits and implanting them into him. What they did not expect was Julius being so utterly stubborn that he took said magical skills and polished them to the point that he could go against some of the higher nobles if needed. This got proven a year later when the son, who was hosting a party with some of the more distinguished groups at the tower, decided the best way to showcase his abilities was to challenge his worthless brother to a duel. Let's just say that if he had taken less shots, he would have been in a better state of mind to last longer. Then again, it may be thanks to said shots that allowed him to take a massive beat down by Julius, who completely dominated the duel despite him using the most mundane aspects of the family works. From what I was told, it was a fight that others could not believe was won by a third-rate mage, given the level of control he had. Thanks goodness they did not know about my involvement in the Holy Grail War. In any case, the reactions by the parents were understandably explosive when they found out about it. The embarrassment that their pure-blood son was inferior to an adopted child with 30 low-grade circuits was only heightened when the other nobles heard about it and laughed at them. So they decided to remedy such a situation by trying to regain the implanted magic circuits and leaving him for dead. It was the family butler that got you away in time, wasn't it? I asked a question to confirm a theory I had. The story was that you killed him while getting away, but when I checked the place and the records, there were a lot of inconsistencies with them, and considering the Balsforth passion for covering their asses, I would say that the story was a load of bull. Julius let out a weak sigh as he nodded, looking even paler than usual. Old man Alfred was one of the small few who did not look down on me and even encouraged me to get better at what I do. He went to get me out the secret passageway when he overheard dear mother about cutting me open. The last time I saw him, he was blocking her spells with his own body. After that, I spent my life back on the streets, learning all the spells that I could get from others before I could think of making a living. It was after my transformation that I returned to the association and took on my brother, and with the help of an enforced Gios, made him surrender his magic circuits. If I recall, the family did not let you do so without a fight? I asked dryly, to which Julius gave a smirk. They tried, but I took them all on easily. Most were left alive with broken limbs and more broken circuits, only a few dead for being total assholes. As for dear daddy and mummy, I decided to leave them in front of the association's doorstep to explain why their entire home was destroyed, their wealth being distributed to the lesser folks, and their son left with a big gap in the chest from which I took the crest from. He let out a laugh only to choke out more blood. Time was running out, so I decided to cut to the chase. I see, so I am to assume this is the result? I held up the jar for confirmation. This is the product of bringing together both of our crests once again, but using my circuits as the main body, he said as he took deep breaths to steady himself. I do not mean to brag, but it is considerably better than when they first implanted them into my brother. Why? I asked again for clarification. You do realize that you still have a chance to survive if you did not rip this out of your body? Honestly, no idea. He shrugged using his remaining shoulder. But from the way I see this, you are not someone who would go and hand over something to the association that has the potential to be abused on the masses. At the same time, you would probably use something if it has anything that could benefit others. Well, that much was clear. But that still did not answer my question properly. The real reason why I am handing it to you is the fact you are very different from the others. Julius said that as he looked at me straight in the eye. You don't go around asking for a reward or bragging of your accomplishments. You kept helping those less fortunate even when there is no real need to do so, and you keep worrying about your opponents. That is not usual for a magus. And thus, I have decided to leave my magic crest in your care. Whether you wish to destroy it, hand it over or even keep it yourself, that decision is yours. My only wish is that you put that to good use. Just call it a gut feeling that it might benefit you in the future. Julius let out another weak chuckle. Man, I must be getting soft at my age. I'm actually let a kid decide for me. I pondered on his words while splitting my attention between him, my surroundings and the magic crest in my hands. Certainly, this was too dangerous to be given back to the association. Waver and a few more sensible magus might be able to find good uses for this, but the rest were either too powerful or too greedy to let that thought get in their way. Furthermore, there were some proper usage for some of the spells in the Balsforth family that could be used to aid others, but were they worth the risks? I sighed while lightly shaking my head. It was times like this that made me wonder what Rin would do. I paused before suppressing a snort. Considering how valuable an intact magic crest is worth, even one belonging to a lowly family was worth quite a fair penny, so one like this was worth millions easy. I shook my head again as I thought about it. Logically, she would not do it, she would rather burn it to a crisp to ensure the association does not get their hands on it, but it was still a funny thought, seeing an imaginary Rin with dollar signs in her eyes. Now that you have it, I would suggest you leave this area quickly. My musings got interrupted by Julius, who was looking a little serious. This is not a good place for you to be in for a long time. The dimensional gaps between worlds are highly unstable, and if you stay too long, the currents would eat away your body. Also, there is another danger here. Another danger? I echoed as I gestured with my hand to place the flask into one of the mini-dimension pockets with me. Seriously, learning this spell was a great asset for me. Since I could not handle the extremely complex spells, I was only left with the options of runic spells and similar archaic magecrafts, which to both me and Rin's surprise, were areas which I could get excellent results with. Now I don't worry about lugging around heavy luggage and other questionable objects. Rin, on the other hand, was grateful for reduced traveling expenses. I chose this spot in case any of the other executors were after me, but you being here has changed the situation significantly. Julius said as his shadows started to writhe uneasily, like they were aware of a danger that was coming. You need to leave now. A sound drew my attention to the undead. who were getting restless and scared about something in the distance. I looked in the general direction they were looking and stared for a while before blinking. A red star? I told you, didn't I? There were only two choices for us sealing designations. He wheezed as he grasped his wounds. I simply chose a third option. To go out with a bang, if I may say so myself. So your option was to take me to the dark gaps of time and dimensions, and fight to the death in an area with a red star. I could not help but ask in a flat tone while pointing at the red light in the distance. Let me ask you something, Shuru Emiya. Have you ever wondered whether there were others like Ort out in any other universe? He asked that while I watched the red light getting bigger from a dot to the size of a quarter. Call it a childish dream, but I had considered it a bit of a quest to seek out other worlds, to see for myself whether or not such creatures were possible. In my years, I have seen many creatures. Most do not even come close to it, or even the true ancestors for that matter. Well, that is kind of the case. You would be hard-pressed to find any stronger than those two monstrosities. But apparently, Julius thought different. At least that used to be the case, until a few days ago when you found me. Julius coughed more blood as he struggled to form more words. That day, just as I was thinking this journey was futile, I have finally found a theory and more importantly, a new type that could compete with those two. Whoa, wait a minute. I interrupted him with a slightly pale face. Are you telling me that there is a creature out here that could potentially be stronger than them? Julius laughed weakly as he raised his arm in the general direction of the star. Shuru Emiya. Allow me to introduce to you. Quite arguably the strongest of all the types we have known aside from Type Moon. He paused as he took in one last breath while looking at the star. Type Great Red. With that, his arm fell to the ground and his eyes closed slowly with a peaceful smile on his face. I did not think too much about it as I looked at the red star that was still growing bigger. Whatever that was, it was still getting bigger at an increasing speed. That meant that whatever was coming my way could really move fast. Thankfully I did not have to bother with the undead as they were running away from this spot like a bunch of headless chickens. It seems that they really did not want to face the big, red, star. Oh, you have got to be freaking kidding me. I yelled as I finally make out what the thing that was coming here using my reinforced eyes, and it was making me sweat in my boots. A dragon. A red dragon. A big, red dragon. A big, red, root-be-damned pissed-off dragon with sharp teeth. Me and my bloody E-rank luck. I quickly grabbed the Kalido amulet that was hanging from my neck and started to pour all my available prana into it. It was a really bad situation for me to have almost zero prana to try and get out of here. And the part that was scary regarding this Type Great Red was the fact it was still getting bigger in the horizon, and considering it hasn't reached this point to begin with, I was getting a rough idea of its true size. I am actually finding myself thinking that I would rather take on Hercules, Lancer, Archer, Gilgamesh, Castor, Rider and Kotomine Kirei all at once in the Holy Grail War again, rather than me taking on the giant dragon that was looking really pissed and hungry. Come on you damn amulet. Work already. The jewel in the middle of the amulet started to glow weakly, with strands of electricity arching from it. It was weak, but there is definitely some prana left inside for one quick travel. Ideally I should not be attempting to travel without fully charging this amulet and having a clear idea of where I am going, but considering my options, I will take my chances with dealing with whatever enemy in the next world than dealing with a big-ass dragon here. Here goes nothing. I thought as I concentrated on the amulet and opened the portal to get me away, just in time from seeing the beast open its mouth with fire spouting out of its nostrils. At that point, I felt pain of the most excruciating type like I have never felt before. It was not the numbing pain I would normally experience traveling between worlds. Rather this felt like my body was being twisted and squashed into a tight container, occasionally getting pulled apart and pieced back together without anesthesia. It was getting too painful. Equals. Strange. That was the first thought that came to mind. The sense that attracted it to this part of the dimension was almost nauseating that it was sorely tempted to just blast the whole area if only to get rid of them. The only reason it held back from doing so was to investigate the two unusual scents and the bright beam of golden light that originated from that spot. The first scent was that of underlying death and burned flesh that was rotting. It was unusual, but that was definitely the feeling it got from it. The promise of despair and death was pervading from its source. But the strength of the scent seemed to have weakened and died out quickly, as though something had ended it. But the second scent was more pleasant, if not more confusing to it. The scent was most certainly human, yet there was a slight hint of steel that was both welcoming yet chilling, and another hint of something that for whatever reason made it think there was a kindred in the area. No matter, it thought as it finally reached the spot where the scents originated. On a floating slab of rock that drifted around in the gap, it saw small creatures scattering in fear, dead bodies on the ground that showed signs of a great battle, and a brief flash of light. The second scent had disappeared with that light, suggesting that it was some teleportation spell, but it did not care. These creatures were invading its home, and it did not like pests in its home. They smelled bad too, probably won't taste good as well. It opened its mouth wide to show rows of sharp teeth and took a deep breath. It should just burn them all to a crisp. RRRRRROOOOOAAAARRRR equals OOFF. I let out a groan of suffering as I finally came to a stop and slumped ungracefully on the ground, feeling chills in the open air. It was not the most graceful or softest of landings, but at least it helped that I had come out of the wormhole on a grassy hill with a gentle slope, making me roll all the way to the bottom before hitting the ground. Judging from the smell and the texture, I was currently on the roadside. At least that meant I was near civilization. I grunted as I tried to lift myself off the ground only to slump again. This was a bad situation for me. I could tell that my injuries were substantial, and I barely had enough strength to move. For now, I was not in danger of being attacked by the dead apostle or the undead, but I do not want my death to be roadkill. Rin would never let it down. Even if that was not the case, there was a high possibility that someone would come along and find me there, and that would make answering questions difficult. I had to get out of here before. That would happen. Oh joy. Somebody get Dr. Takashi now. Someone is on the sidewalk here. A man's voice bellowed close by as footsteps came closer to my side. It seemed that I landed back in Japan, I thought deliriously before letting out an involuntary groan as I was gently rolled over and a light shone on my face. Holy shit. How are you still alive with all this blood and wounds on you? The same voice was tinged in shock as the light flickered on and off around me. I could briefly see through the blood in my eyes a man who was examining my body for my wounds and blood all over me. A sound of wheels clattered in the distance, then a second man's voice came. Is he alive? He is breathing very lightly, but he seems to be losing a lot of blood. The man replied back before lightly grabbing my legs, with the second lightly lifting my shoulders and supporting my head. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. My body was lifted briefly before being placed on something soft. In my semi-conscious thoughts, I noted that my clothes were unusually loose and heavy on me. Must be because of the blood. I felt myself being jolted a few times, before squinting my eyes as I was exposed to even more light. I heard the second man shouting out orders and female voices sounding very frantic. After blinking a few more times, I was able to see a white ceiling and a few overhead lights. I twisted my head a little and watched a few women and men rush around me in a bit of a frenzy. Judging from their clothing and what I had heard, it seemed that I had landed close to a hospital in the area. At least it is in Japan. If it were anywhere else, my language skills are a little rusty, not to mention my lack of passport. Hang in there. The doctor, whose voice I recognized as the second man who came, started to push my stretcher forward as other people started to put an oxygen mask on me and other medical pads. Don't worry kid, we will patch you up good in no time. I see, thanks doc for the info. Guess I will just relax and… Wait a minute, kid, okay granted, I am pretty young at my age, but I'm pretty sure that 20 qualifies me as a young adult. Unless this guy watches a lot of American films, which would be just stew. My thoughts got cut off as my stretcher stopped in front of an elevator and I moved my head to take stock of my situation, only to stare wide-eyed at what I saw. It was me in the reflection of the door, which is the case, yet it cannot be me. I mean, it would be me if my hair were fully red with no hints of white, my skin being very fair and my eyes were back to its golden brown color, and my face being not as hardened from my years of battles and… Oh sweet mother of the root, Alaya, Gaia and everything in between. How in the name of blues tits did I turn back into a root be damned teenager? Author's notes Hello. This is my first attempt at writing a FSN and DXD crossover. You heard of an earworm, right? The type that refers to songs getting trapped in your head. Meet its literature cousin. What I called the writer's brain bug, by which I get ideas from reading and watching shows, and they get stuck in my head that unless I write them down, they will never go away. This is the result of me watching the latest FSN series by Ufotable, and reading high school DxD novels. I don't expect to be writing this often, since I am focusing more on my main story, Iron Stratus. But if people like this story, I could try my hand at this. And I lay my pen down for now. Ch1 of 17 next. High School DxD is a Japanese light novel series written by Issei Ishibumi and illustrated by Miyama Zero. The Fate series is owned by Type Moon. I do not own any of the characters mentioned from both series. The only things I own are the ideas that popped into my head for this story and whatever original characters I would create for the story. My main muses come from Gabriel Blessing and Marcus Galen Sands, authors of great works themselves. This story is meant to be a work of pure fiction made solely for fun. Constructive reviews will be welcomed. Flames will be ignored. Any references to characters in real life are purely coincidental and should not be taken seriously. If I could make money out of my ideas, it would be nice. Root damn it. Published, March 26, 2015. Edited, July 30, 2016, September 18, 2017. Chapter 2. Enter the Magus Part 1. It was situations like this that reminded me that no matter how similar the worlds are in their culture and technology, there were still great differences between the current world I was at and the original world I was from. I have been in this world for roughly 6 months now, and I have been trying to stay incognito ever since. Not easy when you have red hair and towering over most of your fellow counterparts in the area, but at least it was better than having my white hair and tan skin. At the very least, I was thankful that I landed back in Japan with all of its technological comforts, and apparently a world where the technology was more advanced than my homeworld. But as I said, there were some major differences from my world. The major offenders include my non-existence here, no Fuyuki City, no other Emiyas or Tasakas or Matus, and to my total astonishment, the distinct lack of the association here or the clock tower. I mean, if we were to take the first few pointers together, this would be the third or fourth world I teleported to where none of those exist. But the fact that no magical association existed here was a little too unusual. Every world should have a magical group, what with the air being pumped full of prana. I should know this because when I tried to use a skill to extract prana from the air, I was astonished by the sheer magnitude that came inside me. I nearly passed out from the sheer quantity and had to quickly create a few swords to get rid of the excess coming through me. That had to mean wherever I had arrived at, the Age of Gods was still prevalent somehow. It was also by accident that I realized that my weapons did not disappear for an extended period of time, and only do so when I gave the mental order to do so. That would mean that Gaia's effect was either relatively weak, or it did not exist at all. But I am digressing, so I shall get back to where I was. I had spent the first few weeks stuck in the hospital recuperating from my fight with Julius, getting absolutely bored out of my mind doing nothing. As much as I was tempted to use Avalon to speed up the process, I had to restrict its healing properties to avoid having to answer questions about why my wounds seemingly disappear after a few hours, which I did not need since I had to deal with the police who got called in a couple of days after my entry. It was a little difficult thinking of an excuse as to why I was dressed in loose and bloodied clothes, and even more difficult to explain the multiple scars and wounds on my body, and especially the wound above my heart that was still looking as fresh as when I first got it courtesy of Lancer. I would have tried to use a memory alteration spell on them, but my proficiency in them was still not the best, and I did not want to accidentally remove too much memory. Thankfully I did not spend all that time at the association with Rin and Luvia without knowing the art of deception that was prevalent in the Magus community. So with a bit of subtle suggestion, combined with the Japanese awareness of crime culture, and the police were given the impression that I was an abused child who ran away from his kidnappers, with the resulting trauma from my wounds and blood loss leading to my amnesia. Evidently I may have done it a little too well, as the police seemed to have become extremely motivated to find my supposed kidnappers and in the ensuing months, experienced a success rate of over 90% in apprehending abusive parents and criminals dabbling in child trafficking. It also brought about the unintentional reduction of my medical bill when it came time for me to leave the hospital. I was prepared to pay the full amount, but the hospital staff were adamant that I only needed to pay half of my bill, Then when I was about to do that, the police officers involved came along and paid half of that amount, so I only had to repay the remainder in the end. That said, I still had quite a substantial amount to pay off, so I had to work 2 part-time jobs to pay it all off. I also worked my hardest to pay off the police and the staff. It may have been their intentions to help me, but I could not let that be on my conscience. With all that said and done, I was currently in the body of a teenager and in the view of the social system, someone who should be in school. And considering that I do not have enough credentials to suggest otherwise and I could not create too much a ruckus, I had no choice but to go along with their decision. At least until the Kaleido amulet was fully fixed and recharged and I can find a way out of my current predicament. So roughly 2 to 3 months after my arrival into this world, I got transferred to what seemed to be the most prestigious campus in the area, with a somewhat forbidding name, Kuo Academy. If I did not know any better, I would say that a demon was involved in the naming. During my time here, I have worked my ass off to pay off my medical debt while feverishly repairing the Kaleido amulet with whatever materials I could get my hands on. It was not going very well considering not much of the materials used to create the amulet were normal to begin with. Whatever materials I was going to use would have to be subpar, not to mention the capacity that it can store would be limited to 1 trip back home. It was also during this period that I experienced a life that had no dead apostles trying to bite my neck, no mad mages trying to perform heinous experiments, no undead infestation that needed damage control, or any executors or enforcers trying to take my head. It was actually a very relaxing vacation of sorts. It was also a little uneasy and somewhat lackluster experience for me to be in. Back in my home world, my job scope made me have to travel the world taking down sealing designations and dead apostles on a daily basis, to the point where I would be lucky to have a week's worth of break. Rin at one time went to drag me on a month-long trip to recuperate after seeing how messed up my biological clock became. It later became 2 when Luvia, Sakura and a few others tagged along to help her keep me in one area. The lack of action also seemed to be slightly mocking to me, despite how well the situation was for me. I had my fair share of assassins and mad magus trying to take my head due to my sealing designation status, to the extent that I became a little used to their methods and started different strategies to stop them, so not being attacked whatsoever was somewhat alarming. But I guess that was the issue with me being a sword, swords or blades, no matter how one tries to utilize them, could only be used on the battlefield. And this peaceful world probably does not need a sword of blood in its midst. So with that in mind and a body of a 16-year-old teenager, I spent my life handling my homework, fixing the amulet, helping the needy, doing some menial jobs on the side, perform some vigilante work and dealing with high school drama. Kaya. Those 3 again. Get them. And the occasional, perverted trio getting chased by the kendo club after being caught peeping into the changing room. Yeah. That was the story of my current life. I sincerely believe that Zelrech was behind this madness. Also, since I was currently a teenager, which meant time travel, then that meant I could blame the Blue. She must still be holding a grudge against me for the Montreal incident 2 years ago. With a sigh, I held out the broom in my hand, waited for a few seconds, then with the ease of one who has done this many times before, brought it down just in time to catch 3 pairs of feet and sending their owners crashing to the floor. OOFF. All 3 of them got the air knocked out of them from the hard landing and tried to get themselves untangled, just as the sound of stomping feet reached my area. There they are. Oh shit. The 3 guys paled as the kendo club raised their shinai and started to beat them with great prejudice. The 2 girls closest to me turned and smiled. Ah, Emiya-kun. Thank you so much for stopping these 3 again. The girl with the long brown hair tied into a ponytail and 2 bangs adorning the side of her face thanked me while bowing, with her friend with the short light brown hair followed suit. No problem, Kate-san. I accepted her thanks while thinking about the school. Ko Academy was previously an all-girls school that recently turned co-ed to allow boys to enroll. That said, the ratio of girls to boys was extremely high, partially due to the entrance exams and the payment fees to get in. Of the small handful of boys that do get through, these 3 that were getting their asses kicked in front of me were perhaps the most unwanted trio that every girl around would want to kick out of their campus. The perverted trio, as they were called, Hyodo Issei, Matsuda and Motohama were people who seemed to be the very definition of perversity towards anything regarding the female body, and they were completely unremorseful about their behavior, aside from the pain of getting punished from the females. Heck, my first day arriving at this academy, and I had both students and teachers pulling me to the side and warning me about them to make sure I don't get mixed up with the wrong crowd. Apparently they had plans to expand into the perverted quartet, and they extend their invitation to any new male student that came in, be it a transfer student or a freshman. It was just as well they warned me, though it was not quite needed, because soon after that, I found myself unknowingly stopping those three from trying to peep into the gym changing room, thus ruining their moment and somewhat making them decide to not invite me into the group. Unintentionally, I seem to have raised my own status on that day, as both the students and teachers were both very happy about it. Though up to this point, I was a little confused as to why some of the male students occasionally cursed, "Damn handsome," while the females were looking at me with somewhat scary eyes that reminded me of the females back at the clock tower. Ouch. Ah. Pain. I turned to look at the trio who were getting beaten black and blue, before letting out a sigh and turning back to Katase. I don't suppose you can let up on the punishment. I think they got the message right about now. Are you with them? One of the newer members pointed her shinai at me. Nope, I am just fixing and cleaning the lights here. I motioned with the broom at the light fixtures in the literature club room. I was just finishing up when you guys came knocking. That is true. The club president agreed with her friends providing support. Emiya-kun has been helping us for some time now, and he has not been with those awful trio. Emiya? The girl tilted her head in confusion before her eyes widened in recognition. As in the fake janitor? I could so see Rin collapsing on the floor and laughing her tears out if she ever heard my reputation as the fake janitor has crossed worlds. Oh joy. I mentally shook my head as I faced the two girls again. So Katase-san, Murayama-san, could I ask that you let up on the punishment? Murayama hummed as she alternated her attention between the three and me. We could do that, but on one condition, she said with a glint in her eye, one that reminded me a little too much of Rin when she was thinking of extorting me. But this girl was still a novice at that. Let me guess, the air conditioning unit in your club room needs fixing. I nodded at the surprised expressions on their faces. Your advisor had informed me about it, but I would need to check on something later. Would that be fine? Deal. Murayama and Katase beamed at the prospect of getting me as they ordered the club members to stop their attacks. Ehh. Emiya-senpai is coming to our club. The girls let out a squeal as they looked at me with the same scary look that reminded me of a predator looking at potential prey. Okay. Wait a minute, get in line. One of the girls behind the literature club president pouted. We already have him coming to the baseball club later, so no cutting in queue. Damn handsome. The trio cursed at me as they groaned in pain. Ha, such was my life now. Equals. Okay, can I just ask one question regarding the three of you? I phrased the question with a notable tiredness in my voice. I had spent the past few minutes trying to calm the girls into agreeing to an arrangement for me to visit their clubs to fix their issues and disperse from the area, and I could feel the waves of an incoming headache on the way. Why do you three keep getting into situations like this? Matusada, the former jock with the bald head, clenched his fists with great energy as he sat on the floor where they were recovering. Because it is our dream to see the Holy Land for men. And it is our duty to see their bodies and preserve the memories for life. Motohama, the one with the spectacles, proclaimed with great gusto. I shook my head as I turned to the last guy. And what is your excuse? To conquer all obstacles and feast on the opai. Hyodo Issei said it the loudest as his eyes were literally glittering with excitement. I could not help but let out a sigh of exasperation as I compared him to my world's Issei. For all I know, this guy could be his opposite counterpart in this world. Idly I wondered how my world's Issei would react if he found about this guy. I entertained the thought of him using all the Buddhist tools in his arsenal and beating the crap out of the Hyodo kid while screaming, impure thoughts away, at his highest. Yup, that perked me up a little. You do realize that your actions are causing you a lot of hurt, right? So maybe you should tone it down a little? Tone it down. Issei repeated in a shocked tone as the three of them looked at me with disbelief. How can you not see that our actions are fueled with our manly passion? To abandon the dream of seeing that utopia would be to deny our very existence as men. Normally, even I would be a little taken back by their will and desire so strong that I would probably take a step back, but in my current state, I was feeling both tired and slightly irritated. So with a light grimace and slight sadistic pleasure, I tapped into my inner archer, and let loose my secret weapon. That may be the case, but isn't it because of said actions that prevented you guys from getting a girlfriend and fulfilling those desires in the first place? At that, two of them fell to the ground with eyes tearing at the crushing blow, but surprisingly Issei was smiling from ear to ear. Ahahaha. He laughed in a manner that sounded a little evil to me. Your words are powerful, but they mean nothing to me, because I, Hyodo Issei, he proclaimed with his head held up high, now have a girlfriend. At that point, it felt the ambient sound got sucked out of the area, leaving only silence. I blinked once, and then twice. Seriously? I finally asked incredulously. Yup. Her name is Yuma Amano, she's a real beauty. We are having our first date tomorrow, and the best part, he paused before delivering the wham line. She was the one who asked me out. Whoa, I stared at him in surprise before saying the first thing in my head. Well, congratulations, mate. Really thanks. Issei said with excitement as he looked at me happily. I was honestly surprised at the guy actually getting a girlfriend, but I guess miracles do happen. And maybe this Yuma girl can rein in on this guy's perversity. Well, I might as well give him a helping hand. Hyodo Issei. I said in such a serious tone that the three looked at me with slight trepidation. Since this is your first date, I should tell you first. You are to treat this girl with the utmost respect. You do not bring her to any shady locations, and above all else, you do not display any of your perverted qualities. If you can do all of that while being on your best behavior. I gave him a light smile of encouragement. I think you can go steady with her for a long time. Issei blinked before breaking into a smile. Yes, I will take your advice, Shuru. He seemed to have changed his opinion about me positively given the happiness he was experiencing. I waved my hand before heading off to my class. At least the kid might have a happy experience. Damn you eyes. We'll kill you. As soon as he gets away from the onslaught of attacks from his buddies. Are you sure you can carry all of that, Emiya-kun? I let out a light grunt as I adjusted the books in my arms and directed my attention to the girl next to me. It is fine, Kusaka-san. Since the council room is close by, I can still carry it. The girl nodded while giving a thankful smile. Rei Kusaka was a quiet girl of considerable beauty who was a member of the student council. Her long brown hair braided in two, brown eyes and a well-developed figure for her age. She was the sort that invoked the impression of a librarian girl, reinforced by her passion for books and her knowledge of different literature of various sources. Her personality was a combination of both Saber's and Rin's gentle sides and that only raised her popularity status among the males. Ah, here we are. Rhea went a little forward and opened the door, stepping to the side so that I could get through the door. I walked in a few meters before dumping the books with a loud thump, stretching my arms as I glanced around the student council room. I will give them this, the room has to be one of the biggest and most posh room I have seen to date at this campus. I mean, the room felt more like it was meant for the president of a big name company. What with all its furniture that could easily cost more than my current working salary and the white tiles adorning the walls. It was that impressive. Ah, it's Emiya-kun. A voice drew mine and Rhea's attention to the door as a bubbly ball of sunshine came into the room. Hello. The girl waved her hand as she greeted me. I waved back with a smile as I looked at her. Tomo Meguri was another member of the student council of considerable beauty. Combine her reddish-brown hair, brown eyes and slim figure with her hyperactive personality and cheerful disposition, and you have a girl who could quite literally brighten your day and make your worries go away. She was also someone whom I had the slight fear of, if only because her personality was an odd combination of Taiga with all her childish humor and Ilya without the bloodthirsty personality. I cannot imagine, for the life of me, what would happen if the three ever met each other. Oh, the horror. Emiya-kun, are you okay? I got jolted out of my thoughts as Rhea turned to me with a worried face. Ah, I am okay. I waved my hands a little hurriedly. I'm just feeling a little burned out recently. Now, Emiya-kun, this is what we have told you. You should take better care of yourself. Rhea frowned as she placed her hands on her hips, and for a while, I thought I was seeing Saber and Rin at her sides giving me their lectures on my behavior. I blinked and Rhea was in front of me again. Damn it. I need to keep control of my emotions. Understood, Kusaka-san. I managed a smile while holding my hands up in mock defeat. That seemed to convince her to let up a little and let out a smile. Again, I struggled inwardly at her small gestures that reminded me so much of Sabers and Rins when we were together. It was subtle, but they were enough to invoke my memories of them when we were together. Then why don't we help you relax? Tomo went to the table closest to the wall and grabbed the controller for the air conditioning equipment. She turned it on only to be greeted with the sounds of fans sputtering and what sounded like gears screeching. Not again, this is the third time this month. Tomo groaned as she glared at the equipment like it offended her in some way. I guess we would have to get the repairman this time. Rhea sighed dejectedly. Don't need to, I said as I stood up straight. This was my calling as the fake janitor, and I could really use the distraction for now. I can look it over and fixed it on the spot. Before they could say a thing, I grabbed the nearest table and lightly pushed it to the wall, took off my shoes and laid a towel on the table before climbing on top of it and removing the cover of the air conditioner. Under the pretense of looking at intensely with a careful hand, I lightly muttered, "Trace on," and used structural analysis to determine the cause, before grabbing my portable toolset and taking out the necessary ones. "Ah, Emiya-kun. You really don't need to do that." Rhea tried to stop me from my work. "It's okay, I don't mind doing this," I replied as I fiddled with the wiring and took out the worn-out capacitor. "Since I'm here, I might as well do what I can to fix it." "Thank you, Emiya-kun." Tomo let out a very bright smile while Rhea frowned slightly. "Meguri-chan, it is not okay to have someone else fixing our equipment at no expense. And Emiya-kun, you really shouldn't go around helping others all the time. You need to take better care of yourself," Rhea replied while looking at both of us. "I'll be fine, but thank you for your concern," I said as I took up the pliers and fiddled with the insides. "And you're welcome, Tomo-san." I turned to Tomo only to be surprised at her pouting at me. "Is something the matter?" "Meguri," the girl said as she pouted harder. I blinked before asking, "Sorry?" "Me-Gu-ri. I told you last time you can call me by that," Tomo said while still pouting. "You don't need to be so formal all the time." "Ah, I'm not quite sure of that," I replied as I paused to scratch my cheek. "You know Emiya-kun, you can call us by our first names during private times if you want," Rhea said as she placed a hand on her cheek. "Yes, you can," Tomo agreed with great enthusiasm, happy for some support. I could only offer an apologetic smile as I shook my head. "I thank you for the offer, but that might be a little problematic for me." That was the truth, considering that I was still somewhat of a stranger to them, so it did not feel right to call them by their first names. The second reason was their respective fan clubs could be a little troublesome when I start calling them by their first names, and I do not need that type of attention. And lastly, I was still a little unsure of their origins, given the sense coming off them. Any doubts about this world's possibility of the occult were quickly lessened the moment I stepped onto the campus. The scents that came at me were pretty potent for me to note that there were a few of them present in the school, worryingly prominent with the student council. They reminded me a little of the demons back home, but they do not have the scent of rotting flesh or spilled blood. However, there was a distinct flavor that got me a little worked up. I have kept my eye out for a while, but there have been no incidents of students disappearing or going on a sudden murder spree, so I eased off a little. I had also used structural analysis on those I had identified to be different from the regulars. One thing that was noticeable was the unusual body structure and unusual prana circulation. I had avoided close contact, but the closest description I could give was their bodies seemed to be almost radiating prana on a regular basis, unconsciously making others around them feel differently. It definitely aided me that each one of them had their own individual scents mixed in that allowed for easier identification from a distance. Rhea's scent was that of parchment with a hint of rosemary, while Tomo's scent was that of sunflowers. And speaking of the other student council members, I hope you don't mind me tinkering with your equipment, Shitori Kaichu. I almost smiled at the reactions that Rhea and Tomo made as they turned around to see the student council president and vice president at the doorway. "I do not mind Emiya-kun," Sona Shitori replied as she entered the room. A relatively short girl with a slim figure, short black hair and glasses, she was a girl of strict discipline who was apparently the third most popular girl of the school. If Rhea has the nicer sides of Sabers and Rins, Sona has adopted the stricter sides of their personalities. It was also a bit of an unusual sight to witness even the teachers getting scared when she was approaching them, out of fear for having their clothing untidy or not performing to standards. The vice president next to her was another girl of considerable beauty. With long black hair that extended all the way to her knees, heterochimic eyes and substantial curves, which were all accentuated with her height, Tsubaki Shinra was the fourth most popular girl of the campus who had a decidedly less strict policy than Sona. "You know, I wanted to ask for a while, how is it you always know who is coming even when you can't see us?" Tsubaki asked as she entered after Sona. I paused for a moment before mischievously smiling. "Magic." Rhea and Tomo giggled lightly at the joke. "Ha, very few people seem to get my humor. I couldn't exactly say that I could smell the hints of water and mirrors from those two. That might sound very rude." "So is it repairable?" Sona asked as she placed her items on her desk. "It can be fixed," I replied as I placed the final touches to the repairs. "But I think it would be ideal if you could get someone to give this a proper look over. This is temporary at best." "That I think we can make arrangements." Sona gestured to Tsubaki to make a note. I closed the lid while checking for any other issues, before pressing the remote to test the equipment. The sounds of the fans humming softly and the cool breeze in the face was the answer I looked for. "Yay! Emiya-kun fixed it." Tomo beamed as I got down from the table and pushed back to position. "Thank you, Emiya-kun. I guess we should pay you something back." Sona nodded as she thanked me. "Ah, you don't need to do that." I tried to dissuade her only to be stopped by her holding up a hand. "Emiya-kun, it is admirable that you are willing to do this out of generosity. But you really need to consider getting a brain check if you keep thinking that way. It is not healthy for you." Sona said it as she adjusted her glasses, catching the light as she did so. That meant she was in business mode and I should accept it or suffer the consequence. "Good." She pulled out a booklet from the drawer and wrote something before tearing the sheet and handing it over to Tsubaki, who took a glance before nodding. "You will be paid at half the costs for repairs, and part of your school fees would be subsidized based on your other activities. Would that be fine? And even if I say that you don't need to do that, you would not do so, would you?" I remarked with a wry smile. "Indeed," she replied with the slightest hint of a smile. "But if you do not wish to accept the monetary gift, there is always another option. And once again, I must humbly decline your offer to join the student council." I headed off her choice with another wry smile. After the incident with me stopping the perverted trio from peaking and a few other cases where I stepped in to either fix equipment or to help others from rival school delinquents, Sona came to my class to offer me a position in the student council. Although I had refused the first time, she seemed quite determined to get me into her club. "Why don't you want to accept her offer? It seems like a nice deal." Tsubaki asked with a curious look. "Even if you do not want the position, won't the monetary award help? I believe you live on your own, right?" Indeed, most of the male students would have cut off a limb to be in this group of women, if not accept the money, but then again I'm not normal, or of their age group for that matter. I just don't like the idea that I'm getting paid for something I just feel like doing, even if my circumstances are a little problematic. I rubbed the back of my head absent-mindedly as I thought back to the times I got paid against my objections. Word got out about me living alone and that seemed to have struck a chord with quite a few in the academy. Half the time I helped them with something, they either paid me in cash or offered lunch, all while I was trying to convince them that they don't have to. It did not feel right considering I was technically an adult mentally and it was wrong for me to take any money. But all my defenses fell apart the moment Sona came into the picture. If even the student council saw it fit to repay my kindness and bulldozed their way into doing so, there was no way around that. And Sona was particularly hard-headed in repaying a debt. Well, the offer is still open to you," Sona said with a notable frown, before it got replaced with her usual stoic expression. "For now, how about tea? If I recall, you should have no lessons for the next couple of hours, and I would like to ask some questions regarding your life here." "Well, I guess that is okay." I started to speak only to choke rather abruptly as my senses picked up traces of one other creature coming near the room. Ignoring their expressions of worry, I took a quick whiff and immediately stiffened in panic. That scent of overwhelming sweetness that pervaded the room was sending alarm bells blaring in my head. That scent belonged to the one woman whom I felt the urge to run away at all costs. I knew it was just a stupid thought, but all my instincts were screaming at me to run away every time she was close by. The last time I smelled such a scent was when Ryder activated her noble phantasm to drain the school of prana, and that was really bad news. It certainly did not help when the woman was also leaking prana like a running tap set on high, making my hair stand on end. But honestly, the scent I got from that woman was an unusual mix of sweetness and nothingness. Unlike Ryder's scent that was nauseating sweetness, this woman's scent gave the sense that it was almost intoxicating, that it was enticing me to drink from her blood or do something that would make lose my mental restraints, and that was the reason I should stay away from her. "I'm sorry, I just remembered I got something to do, thank you." I said that a little too quickly as I hightailed it out of the room just in time to barely miss the crimson-haired girl and her black-haired pony-tailed companion. "Ah, Emiya-kun, good after." One of them tried to greet me only for me to move away in the opposite direction. "Sorry, very busy, bye-bye." I quickly dashed down the corridor and took the next corner. Again, I know it was stupid and cowardly of me to do this, but considering the amount of prana I had felt from her the first time I seen her and the nauseating scent of sweetness I had closely associated with Ryder, I would rather take my chances with Gilgamesh and Hercules at the same time. Mo. Rias let out an annoyed sound as she pouted while entering the room. Why does Emiya always run away every time I tried to talk to him? Maybe you did something to him so terrible in the past that he has developed a fear for you? Akeno teased as she put a hand on her cheek. After all, you have a tendency to be a little problematic at times. I do not have any tendencies to do that. Rias childishly kicked her feet against the floor. And I don't think I have done anything to warrant such a reaction from him. Yes, I had asked him once about this, Sona remarked while offering a teasing smile of her own. His reply was, I quote, "I feel that if I get any closer to that woman, my soul is in danger for some reason. And I must say, he might have a point there." Hey. Rias pouted even harder as she glared at Sona, who only turned to Rhea with a question. "So, Emiya-kun was working on that only, right?" She pointed to the air conditioner in question. "Yes, is there a problem?" Rhea asked with a slightly worried expression. "Could you check it?" Sona asked as she raised a barrier in the room. That got everyone's expression changed to a somewhat serious look as they looked at her. They knew what she was referring to the moment she raised the soundproof barrier. With slight hesitation, Rhea touched the equipment and closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she let out a sigh and directed her eyes at Sona. "It is faint, but I can detect some traces of magic. It is the same type that had appeared for the past few weeks." "So it is true then," Akeno said a little cautiously. "Emiya-kun is a wizard in our area." "But we did not get word about this." Rias folded her arms as she pondered. "The fact that he appeared without tripping our wards is a little disconcerting. Do you think he is an enemy?" "No, I don't think that is the case," Rhea said with a notable tone before Sona could reply. "The magic I am detecting does not have any harmful effects at all. If anything, it was meant to test the integrity of the innards. And Emiya-kun won't hurt anyone, I know that," Tomo added in her words with clenched fists. Sona used her hands to gesture them to calm down with a comforting smile. She understood the reasons those two were reacting in a rather uncharacteristic manner. The two of them were among the first to welcome Shuru into the academy and were quite close to him during his time here. For Rhea, she was happy to find someone who could understand all the literature references from the old books she often read, not to mention someone whom she could converse rather easily compared to others. As for Tomo, she was ecstatic that someone else apart from the student council was able to keep up with her, and also he was the only one who could keep her in check at times. For Sona's part, she could relate to their trepidations. Shuru, aside from Kiba, was the nicest boy around. Unlike many of the males in the school, he was a total gentleman with the unusual quirk of going around helping others with everyday matters. He was also very modest about his academic scores and his archery skills, which was displayed during the club recruitment drive. Although he had yet to join any clubs, many have been trying to recruit him for both his physical performance and intellect. And she was extremely thankful that he was not drafted into the circle of the perverted trio. Still, he was an unknown magician in their area of supervision, and she can't get too emotional about it. So he is not really a bad person, but the fact still remains that he is an unknown in the area. Sona said as she adjusted her glasses. "We would need to keep an eye on him. But we would need to ensure he does not get tipped off." Tsubaki replied. "He may not have bad intentions towards us, but there is still the possibility that we may provoke a bad reaction from him." Everyone in the room nodded as they considered the idea. "Well, I think we can hold off this discussion for tomorrow. Ria stretched her arms as she yawned. For now, I need to distribute the flyers around town, and you are going to be busy with the new pawn of yours. Sona nodded while frowning. Technically she did not like loose ends, but in this case she could not help the situation. She could only hope that the situation would not worsen. Next day, evening. Okay Shuru, you can go home now. The owner said as he hefted the last of the fruit carts into storage. Are you sure? There are a few more crates still lying around. I replied as I gestured to the small pile at the back of the room. And I was not just thinking about trying to get more cash for the job. The owner was an elderly man who handled the local bar in my area. And although he was a very energetic person, it did not change the fact that at the age of 63, he was exerting more effort than he should and it was showing at times. Those crates can be left there for tomorrow. The old man said as he wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Also you can come in later tomorrow, you have done enough for the day. Before I could rebut, a light knock on the head drew my attention to the elderly lady who was holding up a ladle. She used to hit me. Emma-kun, you should listen to your elders. You can go home and get a good night's sleep, understand young man? She brandished the ladle like a weapon skillfully, and I found myself nodding very quickly. It was an unspoken rule that when an elderly lady scolds you with a ladle, you should just clam up and walk away fast. Okay, thank you for your generosity. I bowed and took my leave, stopping for a moment to grab a smaller pack and put it on the other shelf. Just one less thing for them to move. I wasn't too sure why I decided to take the shortcut through the park to get to my apartment. Maybe it was because I wanted to take the scenic route for a change, or perhaps the fact that I got off from work early meant I could enjoy my rest in the comfort of my futon. Then again it could have been due to the scent of blood that I caught a whiff of when I passed by the area and decided to investigate it. I stopped by a small bush and waited for the owner to come around. It did not take long when I heard a few voices coming from some nearby bushes. To my surprise, Issei came around the corner, accompanying a girl whom I could not help but gawk a little stupidly at the fact that Issei was able to go near such a creature. She had long black hair and a very attractive figure from which her clothes clung tightly to. She seemed a little shorter than Issei and had the air of an innocent girl who was in love with the boy with her, but that did little to ease my mind, because unless I was mistaken, the scent of blood and feathers was originating from her, and it was getting a lot stronger as the sun went down. Hey, Issei-kun. The girl called out to him as she stopped. There is something I want to do to celebrate our first date. Can you listen to my wish? Bad news. I got out of my hiding spot and dashed forward while loading the trigger in my head. The scent of blood just skyrocketed and from where I was hiding, I could see the glint in her eyes. That was definitely not a good thing, and the silly kid was too love-struck to notice. I just need to make it on time. Will you die for me? Darn it. I quickly create a simple shield and projected it between the two of them just in the nick of time, as a spear of light formed in her hand and she thrust forward with the intent to kill, only to have it deterred by my shield. Quickly seizing the moment, I threw a small blade to distract her before grabbing Issei by the collar and dragging his ass out of the way. What the? Shuru? Issei blurted as he struggled between escaping my grip and getting a hold of his bearings. I ignored his protests and threw him into the nearest bush, before bringing up Kanshu and Bikuya to block the light spear aimed at my head. I certainly did not expect my second target to appear in front of me when I was about to kill the first one. The girl mused as she appeared before me while descending from the sky. She had certainly changed greatly from the image of that young girl on a date. She seemed to have matured to that of a young woman, and her clothes were decidedly the type which belonged to only the raunchiest stripper clubs, and she had two black wings from her back that lightly folded as she landed on her feet. But the biggest change came from her facial expressions. Gone was the innocent expression of an adolescent girl, and in its place was one of extreme cruelty and deception which I was all too familiar with. I don't believe I have the pleasure to know you, I remarked as I took my stance. Though considering the occasion, I think you may have ruined that encounter. Well, not that it would matter, but I would have preferred that we did not meet like this. She let out a rather malicious smirk as she looked at me. That way, when I do get to you, I will get to see your expressions when I stab you. Okay, this girl just earned her spot on the psychotic masochist list. I took a quick glance at Issei who was looking at her with a mixture of horror and utter confusion. It was definitely too much for the kid to understand everything that transpired, and that just deepened my rage at the fact that lives could be taken so easily in the cover of the night, that it was creatures like her that preyed on innocence without reserve. Now, it has been a pleasure to meet you in person, but since both of my targets are in front of me, I should not waste this opportunity to get rid of you both. The girl summoned another light spear in her hand as she alternated her sights between me and Issei. I guess I should complete the first task at hand. Honestly, how gullible did you think I was? I was already my right arm to intercept the spear thrown at Issei while creating another blade to attack her at her side, before jumping forward and kicking her in the abdomen as she dodged the blade. I did not stop to look at my handiwork as I took out from my dimensional pockets 4 short daggers with talismans attached at the hilts and threw them to the sides, each one automatically flying a few kilometers away from each other and impaling their tips into the ground in the form of a perfect square. The talismans glowed brightly, then a thin beam of light shot up from them, connecting to one another in an intricate web of energy. Good thing I managed to procure an extra supply of these Shinto barrier charms before I went to fight Julius. I would need to thank Talia when I come back. Right then, I took a stance with my favorite blades as I looked at the bird lady. Time to go hunting. Yawn. We managed to get a lot of customers this time round. Ria stretched her arms as she yawned. Here's hoping we can get a lot of requests this year. Oofufu, true, we did not get as many last year, so maybe we can get lucky. Akeno replied as she walked steadily alongside her. In the evening sun, the two of them walking by grass made for a sight that many from their academy would be delighted to see. So Akeno. Rias turned to her with a cursory glance. What do you think? I presume you are referring to Emma Yakun? Akeno asked to confirm her friend's query. She would be surprised if that was not what Rias had in mind. Well, considering he has been at the academy for this long, I would have thought that he was trying to kill us, or do something to the school. Rias pondered as she placed her hands behind her hips and started to walk in big but slow steps. But as far as I can tell, he does not have any bad intentions towards us, and if anything his attitude is the biggest mystery. He honestly goes out of his way to help others even when they don't ask for it. But is that not what makes him attractive in a sense? Akeno joked as she thought about the conversations she overheard from her fellow schoolmates. Shuru's modesty, maturity and tendency to help others with no strings attached had certainly earned him quite a following that was comparable to Kiba's, and from what she heard, it seemed the girls were wishing for the two to meet sometime soon. Oh, the possible mayhem that could occur. But you know, I do wonder about something. Akeno frowned as she voiced out the thought in her head. The magic he used on the equipment were not the type for casting barriers or curses of any sort, and since we did not know for a long time until Kaneko pointed it out, I think he does not come from any of the traditional schools we know. Well, there is that. Rias nodded as she listened. But I also noticed that he has a tendency to react differently to any of us. Rias let out a small scowl at the memories of Shuru running away every time she came close. Even when he heard my name from Sona, it seemed he did not react to it like the others do. So you think he may not have grown up knowing everything? Is that what you are suggesting? Akeno raised an eyebrow at her suggestion. Certainly it would make sense, if not often, for someone to not know her name well enough, but that would be ludicrous. Everyone apart from the normal folk would know what the Gremory name was the moment they hear it. It was a name that was linked to one of the power groups in the underworld after all. It wouldn't be the first time. Rias commented as she mentally listed all the information she knew about the boy. And if he were aware of us, he would not interact with Sona's peerage for so long. Akeno nodded as she mused about his interactions with the members. So what do you think? Rias turned around with a smile that Akeno was all too familiar with. If he is a wizard in the academy, then that would be just perfect. I still have one more bishop piece that could complement his magic, and we can have one more magic user in our midst. Provided Sona hasn't gotten to him yet. Akeno reminded Rias about her rival. I do know that she has been trying to get him into her peerage for some time now, and with the knowledge that he is a possible wizard in the school, she would double her efforts for sure. That's true. Rias pouted at the possible loss of a potential ally. You know, since it is not yet nighttime, let's call Sona for an outing. I think she needs a break as well. Rias looked to the sky as Akeno took out a phone and dialed a number to call Sona. She needed something to try and get Shuru on her side. Having a magician on her peerage would be a great boost in attack and defense, and it would certainly be interesting to know the different magical cultures out in the world. Maybe she should try that new udon store to tempt Sona into giving up Emiya? Further thoughts were interrupted by a sudden pulse of power that sent shivers down her spine. Both of them turned in the general direction where they felt its intensity. Rias, this feeling, Akeno commented as she focused her senses in the direction. I know, the feeling is similar to that of Shinto barriers. Rias frowned deeply. But I don't recognize the flavor of its power, and its strength is completely different from the ones I know. Crack. Boom. The park a few kilometers ahead of them started flashing beams of light and parts of the area got blown up spectacularly. It seemed that the barrier was mainly placed to contain the explosions, as the chunks of earth that flew the air just stopped after hitting the barrier and harmlessly dropped back down. Looks like we have quite a battle going on, Rias commented as she noted the scale of destruction that was tearing the park apart. On the ground, people would probably feel the explosions but would probably write it off as vibrations from the construction site nearby. But for creatures like her, and at their vantage point, it was quite a sight to see trees and chunks of earth flying to the air in all directions. Rias, Sona and Tsubaki are coming to us. Akeno told her as she kept her phone. It seems they were close by when they felt the energy. They would be coming here to strategize what to do. Rias was about to say something when she felt a pulse in her pocket. Perplexed, she took out her seal and stared at the glow it was emitting. A summons at this time. It was either one extremely big coincidence or she had some bad luck. Who needed her at this time? She paused as she looked at the explosions, then with a slight movement, she pointed her seal in that direction and noted the intensity which increased greatly. Well. This is a very interesting development. Rias let out a smile as she looked on. Yup, it was official. My luck stats were definitely E rank. I was having a slightly harder time with this silly bird brain than needed because of her constant dodging in the air. Normally, I would just rain the entire area with swords to ensure I can hinder their movements, if not impale them to the ground. But considering we were in an open area extremely close to a residential area, I had to keep the collateral damage to a bare minimum. So my best compromise was using a combination of Bikuya and Kanshu to defend myself from her constant throwing of light spears, and a few blades to shoot at her in the air and distract her. Still, it was just another hunting session for me. Damn you bloody wizard. The woman hissed as she barely dodged another one of my blades aimed at her head. You dare to raise your pathetic blades at me? Well, you look like you could use a haircut, I quipped as I moved away from her spears. It had been slow work, but I was able to get her away from Issei, and that meant I could use some of my other talents. I materialized a bow in my left hand and projected a nameless blade in my right, all the while keeping the image of what I want to accomplish. What are you going to do with that? Shoot me with a sword? The girl jeered at me, but her posture and her eyes betrayed her emotions, and she was definitely wondering what I was about to do. Well, then I best to make sure I don't disappoint. My steel is twisted, my soul is fragile, and my core is distorted, I muttered as I notched the blade to the bowstring and pulled it back, all the while altering the blade's form to be more streamlined and focused to the point that the prana stored inside was literally roaring to be released from its shell. The bird lady seemed to have felt the prana, as her eyes went wide and she started to fly upwards to get away from my shot. Too bad for her. I released the projectile, and sent it flying straight towards her. As she tried to move away, the projectile glowed red and split to smaller versions that actively chased her like heat-seeking missiles. She panicked and started flying in all directions as the shots picked up speed and weaved around her. It was only when she nearly crashed into a tree that she realized that she was completely surrounded by the interweaving projectiles, just as I planned. In a way, it was boring. Boom. I snapped my fingers as I said that in a flat tone. At least I was sated by the sight of the projectiles exploding loudly and the body crashing to the ground hard. I slowly made my way to the barely breathing woman, noting that she was apparently handling the damage a lot better than I had anticipated. Clearly, whatever species she belonged to, they possessed great tenacity. Even the wounds, though severe enough to kill, were looking a lot smaller than they should. Just another question to my growing list for this world. But first things first. Damn you. The woman panted as she struggled to get up only to slump on the ground. You dare to make me grovel on the ground like a dog, you damn mongrel. Seriously, that's the best insult you got. I have known others who could think of better versions. I snorted as I stood in front of her. Oh, and for your info, you should say, mongrel, with a drawl at the end. One guy the first knew can do it so well it is practically patented for him. The expression on her face made me want to smirk exactly like the fellow I spoke of. Now that I have your undivided attention, I would want some answers right now. I traced a sword and pointed the edge at her body. What do you mean by us being your targets? And why should I answer you? She taunted me in a mocking tone, to which I answered back with a quick slice of her wing. Clipping a few of her feathers and bits of bones and flesh, she screamed at the pain as she clutched her wound. I am not in a very cheerful mood to have you testing my patience. I maintained my tone as I looked at her. I might have an idea as to why I am being targeted, but I would like to hear from your mouth as to why you are attacking us, especially a normal human like Issei. Ha! You humans are all the same, think you know everything but you don't. The girl spat at me as she managed to stop her bleeding. A quick projection stabbed her other hand into the pavement, adding a new wound to her. I will not ask again. I narrowed my eyes as I focused my intent to control the effects from the black key stabbing her hand. The weapon seemed particularly overjoyed at the prospect of killing the creature in front of me, and it was taking a lot of my attention to stop it from spreading its effects all over her body and killing her on the spot. Okay, she yelled as she tried to pull the blade out of her hand, which was starting to turn black from the wound. I obliged by gripping the handle and yanking it out quickly, making her yelp in pain as fresh blood flowed out of her hand. Talk. Now. Ha, I was ordered to keep an eye on the boy, because he has something in his possession that interested my leader. The girl panted her reply as she clutched at her wounds. He apparently has a sacred gear that my leader felt it was too dangerous to be left alone, so I was tasked to keep an eye on him, and if he was deemed too dangerous, I was to get rid of him. Sacred gear, the hell type of thing is that? I thought inwardly while checking her body language for any signs of deceit. Not that I needed to. Pain was a pretty good motivator for situations like this, and from what I could tell, she was more of the barking type than the biting type. What about me then? What is the official reason for coming after me? I asked the bit that concerned me greatly, and based on her answer, I was right. My leader was curious about you as well, when he noted you had an unusual power around you. She turned her hateful eyes at me as she struggled to get herself conscious. He checked up on you but could not find a single bit of information, so I was tasked to find you after I got rid of the brat and disposed of the gear. Damn it, was I too lax with my security? I guess I got careless due to the notion that no one would recognize me in this world, but I had been a little liberal with my abilities for some time now when dealing with other side jobs, and if that caught someone's attention, this was a serious issue. I would need to find out who after I dispose of her. Then again. Alright then, tell me who your boss is. I decided to consider my options by asking her that. Like hell I would. She glared at him with lots of venom in her eyes. I would rather be dead than to betray him. I sighed inwardly at the sight before me. She was the fanatical type it seemed, someone who would rather choose to endure the 7 levels of the hell than to betray her trust of the leader. I have met a great deal of this type back in my old world, where the followers of some crazy magus would gladly throw themselves into the fire or slit their throats if they felt would aid their master in his quest for the Akasha records. There was no amount of therapy to overcome such devotion. Guess there was only one thing to do. I slowly raised the blade while looking at her resolutely. Since she won't tell me who was her leader or the other details, I would have to do it the longer way. But at least I would rid the world of one less damned creature. For a while the blade was held up high. Then with a quick movement, I swung my arm and... Wait. I barely reacted in time to stop my blade short of bifurcating Issei as he stood in front of me with his arms wide open to protect the bird lady behind him. His expression was a mixture of fear, pain and confusion as he shook uncontrollably in front of me. Issei, what are you doing? I asked softly while keeping my blade in position. Shuru, please don't hurt her. Issei begged as he tried to move his arms in a manner that would prevent me from getting a clean hit on her. Issei, maybe you got hit harder than I thought, but do you realize what you just said? I narrowed my eyes at him. If I do let her go, she would come after you again. Is that really what you want? I don't know what is going on anymore, but I do know that you are about to kill Yuma. Issei looked at me with tearful eyes. Please just let her go. I looked at him with such an expression and sighed. As much as I wanted to oblige to his request, the fact remained that the bird lady was a danger to everyone, especially him, and that letting her go free was the biggest mistake he could do. In an unusual but cruel twist, that decision got taken over by someone else. "Well, you are in quite a pickle, eh?" A voice from behind was the only warning I got to move the blade in time to block a shot to my head, forcing me back a few feet before I could stop. I looked up and found myself staring at a guy who lightly landed on his feet and folded his wings behind him. He was an older man with short black hair, roughly in his mid-50s, and was dressed in an old pale violet trench coat with a fedora covering his head, making him look like he was imitating a character from the old Western movies. "So, someone was saying that she did not need any help dealing with a mere human, huh?" the man asked in a mocking tone as he looked around at the destruction within the area. "Good thing I was in the area and decided to find you, Lady Rainier. If it were not for that weird barrier, I wouldn't have noticed you were getting your ass kicked around." "Shut up, Donasek. Stab." I turned my head quickly to find Issei standing weakly with a light spear protruding from his chest, with the woman standing behind him with a slightly irritated expression while holding the spear in her hand. I was just getting sidetracked by the wizard here. "Wizard?" The man turned to me while narrowing his eyes. "So the second target to watch out for was a wizard? Guess this one is a little unusual. I have never heard of one who fights with swords before. A sacred gear user of swords, perhaps? Who knows?" She shrugged as she pierced the spear deeper into eyes, causing him to cough up more blood from the mouth. "I just want to get rid of these two right now and—" Whatever she wanted to say, I didn't care anymore. I sprung forward and with a quick jab, punched her cleanly in the face that caused her to stumble and pull the spear out of Issei's body. I managed to grab his body just before he fell to the ground and pulled him away from the two. Once he was secured, I immediately turned and ran in the opposite direction with my reinforced legs. "Oh, so you think you could just hit me and take my prey away?" The woman's voice was audible with a hint of disdain for me. "Fine, consider it your final gift from Rainier of Grigori, because when I come after you, yours would be the next corpse to taste my wrath." I did not look back at all and just kept on running at full speed, using the trees to prevent them having a clear shot at my back, until I arrived at a small cluster of bushes and a big tree that served as a good spot to take stock of the situation. I put Issei gently on the softest patch of grass I could find and checked his wound. It was a pretty fatal wound that cut through his spine and his heart. I could almost the grass patch under him through the gaping wound. No matter how I looked at it, he needed a doctor quickly or he would die on the spot. "Hang on, Issei. You are not going to die on my watch." I checked my prana levels to see if it was enough. Then closing my eyes briefly, I traced a staff entwined by a wooden serpent, wrapping his arm around it and pouring some of my prana inside. The eyes on the figurehead glowed green, before a light shone from the staff and spread to his body, focusing mainly on the wound and starting to make it smaller. The staff of Asclepius, the tool once wielded by the deity of healing and medicine to help the sickly and those who were extremely weak in mind and soul. I encountered this during my trip to Greece and added it to my collection to at least have an edge in my fights, but its effects were diminished due to me being a mortal who could not fully comprehend the true aspect of the staff used by the god. Still, it should be enough to keep Issei alive. For now, I could only supply the staff with whatever prana I could spare and hoped that it would be enough. From my position, I could see the two creatures approaching my position, and I would not want to give them an opportunity to finish the orb. "Stay here, you'll be safer that way." I moved a few of the branches to hide him better before getting up. "I'll be back." With that, I sprung towards the next clearing to gain some distance between them and the kid. "I will save him no matter what. Equals, is this it for me?" Issei thought deliriously as he looked down at the spear protruding from his chest, his blood soaking the shirt that he took a long time to pick for his date. It did not make sense at all. Why would he have a spear stabbed him from behind? No, for that matter, everything did not make sense. Starting with Yuma asking him to die for her, to her using some weapon to attack him, to her new appearance as an older woman with a rather unusual clothing and black wings, to her sounding so malicious and cruel as she tried to stab him continuously, to the man with the same pair of wings appearing and attacking. After that, he noted his world spinning uncontrollably to the point he felt like throwing up, before he was granted reprieve by being laid down on something soft and a green light appearing in his vision. "Hang on, Issei. You are not going to die on my watch. Ah yes. How could he forget the parts where Shuru saved him from Yuma? Where Shuru fought her off using weapons that appeared out of thin air, and also the bit where he saw his expression as he got stabbed from behind. Shuru was trying to save him, and he ended up wasting his efforts by presenting himself to Yuma on a silver platter. Stay here, you'll be safer that way. Shuru's voice echoed to him like he was at the far end of a tunnel. I'll be back. He heard Shuru said that before his figure vanished and the shadowy forms of his attackers fluttered after him. No, he couldn't do that. He should not be doing that. He should not be facing his attackers alone without someone to help him. Someone, anyone. Help Shuru. Before his vision went dark, Issei noted subconsciously that he was clutching to some papers in his pocket, and for whatever reason, he thought he could see a glimmer of crimson light. Equals for the 8th time in the row. The sky lit up brightly as one of my swords got deflected by Donasik's spear and exploded in both his and Reinare's faces. I was able to get their attention for quite some time now, partially because Rainare seemed pretty intent on killing me herself after my interrogation with her. The other fellow on the other hand seemed more interested in having an opponent who could keep up with the both of them and stuck around to take me on. End result. When the smoke cleared, one was looking really murderous, while the other looked like he was having the most fun in a long time. This damn wizard is taking up a lot of time. We need to find that brat quickly. Rainare hissed as she formed another spear in her hand and gripped it tightly. Come on. Lighten up, Rainare. When was the last time we had such a good opponent to keep us entertained? The man remarked as he let out a very scary smile. We don't have time for your battle ego. Rainare glared at her companion with a lot of contempt in her eyes. Considering all the destruction that just transpired, it won't be long until the owners of this town get wind of us and come here. We need to get rid of these two now. Well, that was just great then. So this town had supervisors to safeguard the area, kind of like Rin when she was the second owner of Fuyuki. But considering the circumstances, I would prefer to finish them early and make my getaway. And judging from their expressions, they thought the same. Well, it is a bit disappointing, but it seems I can't play around with you anymore. The guy gave a frown as he turned to me. So I would like to ask a favor from you. Please scream when I torture you. Geez, that would be a really bad favor. I quipped as I projected a fresh set of my favorite blades into my hands. How about I make you scream instead? Ha 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 ha. Donasik gleefully flashed that scary smile at me. Let's see you do that, boy. Before Rainare could react, he lunged at me with such speed that I barely reacted on time to deflect the tip aimed at my head. Well, from the looks of it, I have managed to rile up the both of them, because they seemed to be picking up their act and their attacks were getting more aggressive and accurate. Oh joy. Ha. What's wrong, having trouble dealing with the fallen of Grigori? Rainare gleefully yelled as she repeatedly shot a few spears of light at me from a distance, forcing me into defense while Donansik attacked at close quarters each time I let an opening for him to exploit, which I barely managed to deflect on time. Damn it, at this rate I really going to get my butt kicked. You know what? Root this. Fending off another barrage of attacks from them, I projected a large number of blades that rained down on the area until we were completely surrounded by them. The protection spells on them started to activate and create a solid wall of light that extended high up in the sky and completely containing the three of us inside. Once I confirmed the barrier was up and fully secure, I abandoned most of the discarded blades on the ground to conserve my prana for the one I was about to project. I am the bone of my sword. In my right hand, an outline of a sword shimmered lightly. Then with a bright flash of light, a blue blade with silver edges and a blue handleguard appeared in my hand. Ideally, I would be using this blade when I had the afternoon sun on my side, but given that I did not want to destroy the neighborhood and the sunset was still around, this would do just fine. What the? Donasik paused as he looked at the blade with an expression that resembled fearful reverence and anticipation of the unknown. Even Rainare seemed to have halted at the sight of the blade that was beginning to glow with a bright radiance. Their admiration stopped when their spears started to crack and strands of light energy leaked out to join my blade. Our light is disappearing. Rainare looked at her spear before looking at the balls of light that was appearing all over the area and started to gather around the blue blade. She poured more of her prana into the spear to bring back its shape and raising it to take aim. He is doing something, kill him. Caliber, just kill him already. Rainier threw her spears directly at my head in an attempt to stop my attack. But again, too bad for her. Galatine. I swung the sword hard, sending a huge burst of prana that covered the entire area we were in, its power being focused within the barrier that was clearly getting strained by the amount of prana being forced inside like a funnel. This effect continued for a solid minute before the prana burst dissipated through the cracks in the barrier, slowly revealing the wreckage of the battlefield I was in, with the broken pavement strewn around, uprooted trees with smoldering branches and partially melted lampposts. Maybe I should have held back a little. A groan drew my attention to the last location I saw those two, and what I saw nearly made me groan in exasperation. A few meters away from where I stood, Donasek was barely standing using his spear as a support to stand upright. He was quite a wreck to say the least. His coat was completely burnt to a crisp, and his trousers were notably charred black at the edges. The bare chest that was peeking from underneath the coat showed severe first and third-degree burns, with blood flowing from the cracks in between the skin. The biggest damage came from his face, where half of it got seared black from the blast, making him lose half of his hair in the process. Shame the same can't be said for Rainier, who was glaring at me from behind him. It would seem that she used him as a meat shield to fend off the majority of the blast, thus negating the damage and getting mostly superficial wounds. Okay, seriously, does this girl have B-rank luck by chance? I have been bombarding her with explosive attacks and she still lived on like a cockroach. Damn you, human. She hissed with enough venom to make me feel shivers down my spine. You dare to hurt us this much, make us grovel on the same ground as you, we who belong to the sky. You damn insignificant human, I would make you suffer for this humiliation 1,000 times over. When I'm done with you, there won't be anything left of you on this pathetic earth you stand on. Whoa, do I know how to piss people off or what? That mental question got answered in a physical manner when light spears started to form behind in large quantities, illuminating the area with their purple radiance as they were all directed at me. It seemed that she was not used to doing this. I could feel the faint presence of unstable prana forming, but she was making it up with the sheer rage she was feeling. Oh come on, I was being rhetorical when I asked that question, damn it. Excalibur Galatine vanished in a cloud of prana, in its place Kanshu and Bikuya returned as I looked at the impending storm of spears that would skewer like a kebab. I really wondered whether I was able to pull off another blade to blast them all to smithereens, but that might be a little over the top for me. Guess I would have to make do with defense. At least make your death a worthy one by screaming in pain. With that, spears started to rain down on me in all directions, each with enough prana to blow me to bits if not skewer me with holes. Trace bullet, continuous fire. I let loose the storm of blades to intercept the spears in my way, using Kanshu and Bikuya to cut down or deflect the few that got past. This was reminding me so much of Archer's fight with Castor as he had to handle her bombardment of attacks. This was so not funny for me. Just go down already. I knocked the last spear out of the way before sending a blade towards and exploding it in her face, distracting her long enough to halt the onslaught and introduced her to my version. The sight of her and Donasek flying through the air from the explosions was rather satisfying indeed. Damn this wizard! Rainier yelled as she turned to me once again, but before I could make a move, she paused for a moment before her scowl deepened and her energy dissipated. I also noted that whatever caught her attention, it was behind me. Damn, they are here. Okay, granted, I was a little rusty in the detection department, but I don't think I would have missed out anyone behind me. I focused my senses to the surrounding area, and only after taking a quick whiff did I understand Rainire's agitation, because a few meters behind me, I caught the scent of overwhelming sweetness. The same scent as the crimson-haired girl. HMPH. Rainier stood a little taller and glared at me. Count yourself lucky that some interference has arrived. Next time you will be dead. Rainier opened her wings and took off in the air, pausing to look at Donasek. Get up you oaf, we are leaving. The man did not reply and instead looked at me with his good eye. He was certainly not smiling anymore given the damage I gave him. We will have our rematch, boy, mark my words. With that, he opened his wings and followed Rainier, who vanished in a flash of light and feathers. Oh, like hell I am going to let them go for what they did to Issei. Oh no you don't. I threw both of my blades right at him, cutting off both of his wings and sending him crashing to the ground. Gah! Donasek glared at me as he stabbed the spear into the ground to lift himself up. Damn you boy. That's it, I don't care about anything else. You will suffer for this. Yeah, like I haven't heard that before. Now then, time for some much-needed practice. Spirit and technique, flawless and firm. I traced a fresh set of Kanshu and Bikuya and launched them from my arms, the blades flying about sideways. Danasik quickly used his spear to deflect Kanshu while stumbling to avoid Bikuya from stabbing his neck. Our strength rips the mountains, our swords split the water. I traced a second set of blades and charged forward, slashing at him just as the other two blades came back from behind him. With the previous set attacking his back, Danasik panicked and attempted to parry off both attacks. He managed to block the Kanshu in my hand but failed to stop the first Bikuya from slashing his shoulder. He stumbled to block the first Kanshu, thus giving me the opportunity to cut his back with the other Bikuya. Damn you boy! He screamed as he swung wildly at me. I simply jumped back and threw my blades to the sides to add to the pair flying in the air, while tracing the final set in my hands. Our names reach the Imperial Villa, trace overedge. I flooded the blades with my prana, feeling the blades get heavier as they lengthened and expanded beyond their original size. It was not an even expansion. As they grew, the blades started to crack and splinter from the hilt, until they resembled nothing more than a pair of black and white wings with feathers of broken steel adorning the back. Danasik, who was busy alternating his attention between the flying blades and myself, turned pale at the sight of my elongated blades as I rushed forward at him. He brought up his spear to try and block the blades. Too bad he was a second too late. The two of us cannot hold the heavens together. Crane wing 3 realms. I shouted as I slammed the blades into him just as the other two pairs came from behind and made contact with him. With a loud explosion, the blades completely shattered, sending the broken shards of steel straight at him, completely shredding his body and clothes, tearing into his flesh and sending him flying a few feet into the trees and bushes. The attack continued on, sending his already battered corpse crashing into the trees and causing them to topple over him, completely covering his body and leaving behind a smoking wreck. For a while, I held my stance, waiting to see if he managed to survive the attack. Only when the final tree dropped, I stood up slowly to check the area. When no one else came to avenge him, I quickly turned around and made my way to Issei. It did not take too long to get back to find him still on the ground with the staff disappearing into the wind. Issei. Wake up! I rushed to him and checked his pulse. I was relieved to see him breathing a little heavily. At least that meant he was alive. But when I checked the wound, relief turned to surprise. I remembered the size of the wound was a lot bigger than it should, yet the wound was a lot smaller now. Even the staff of Asclepius would have trouble closing a large wound like his since I was not its real owner and it was merely a fake that I projected. But as I checked it again, a scent came from the wound that made me pause in fear. Oh no, I closed my eyes to concentrate on the scent, praying I was wrong. When I talked to him earlier, he was most certainly human. But now as I was tending to him, I could catch a faint scent from him. The same scent that appeared at the academy. The same scent that was evident in the student council. The same scent as that crimson-haired girl. The same scent as the ones behind me. I traced a few daggers and quickly threw them behind me, sensing the group scattering to avoid them. I bought a new bikuya in my hand and stood up while talking in a very angry but restrained tone. I am in a very bad mood right now, so you have 10 seconds to announce and explain yourselves before I give you the same treatment as that guy over there. A moment of silence, then 4 figures appeared at both sides of me from the shadows. I already got an idea of who was watching based on their scents, and seeing them in person only confirmed my suspicions and deepened my frown. Good evening, ladies. I would suspect that this is not a regular walk for you. No, it isn't. Rias Gremory flicked her crimson hair lightly as she smiled at me. The most popular girl of the academy was standing with her hand on her hip, and I must admit, even in the night she was an extremely eye-catching beauty whom one cannot drag their eyes away willingly. She seemed to encompass the Western standard of female beauty. Long red hair that reached her legs, great facial features and an extremely voluptuous figure that would put models older than her to shame. If anything, she might give Ryder a run for her money when she gets older. Oofufu, it certainly isn't a regular walk for us, her black ponytailed companion remarked as she stood a little away from her. The second most popular girl was also eye-catching based on the Eastern standpoint. With her black hair tied in a ponytail and demure manner coupled with another eye-catching figure, she represented the ideal Yamato Nadeshiko that all Japanese girls desire to grow up to. On my left, Sona and Tsubaki were looking at me and the battle scene with a discerning eye, for a while looking at the blades that were scattered around the battlefield. Wordlessly, I dismissed the tracing, making them disappear back into prana. I figured they were more or less in the same group. The question that need answering was, are they allies? So Shuru Emiya. I turned my head towards Rias, who was looking at me with a smile and a look that made me a little uncomfortable. The fake janitor, the kendo expert, the ace archer, the genius student who got the 6th place in the school exam on his first transfer and skipped a whole year. And now a wizard in hiding, huh? Magus. I automatically corrected her without meaning to. And I honestly don't think I'm that much a genius. News of my achievements have been greatly exaggerated. Rias let out a light laugh at my dry humor. You are too modest, Shuru. I know about your work around the school, but still, you have a lot of hidden talents. You have good tactics and no stranger to combat, not to mention your swords. Yup. I really do not like the look in her eyes when she was commenting about me. Time to end the conversation. Can I confirm something with you all? I asked everyone in general. Why did you not step in to save Issei earlier or help me when those creatures attacked us? But it looked like you got it under control, so we just went to heal the boy while you took on the role of the knight in shining armor. Akeno replied as she loosely took a stance that I recognized as one preparing for sudden confrontations. At the corner of the eye, I could see Tsubaki doing the same thing while standing slightly in front of Sona. You did more than that. I raised the blade and pointed at Rias. You did something else, didn't you? Because whatever you did, I can detect faint traces of the same scent on him as you. It's rude to say that a woman smells, Emiya-kun. Rias pouted while as though offended by my words. I simply defended my newest addition to my peerage, that's all. Peerage? I frowned as I thought inwardly. I decided to go for broke and just ask straight out. What are you girls? Oh, you don't know who we are. Rias tilted her head curiously as she watched me closely. It seems you really do not know who or what we are. That is rather surprising. It has been quite a while since anyone from the supernatural side knows little of us. Very well then, I shall tell you. Rias. Sona spoke with a notable tone of hesitation in her voice. I think our secrecy has been blown for quite a while, considering our interactions. Rias replied before turning to me. Then to my unpleasant surprise, 2 wings resembling that of bats emerged from her back and opened wide while she took a bow. My name is Rias Gremory, a devil. Pleasure to meet you properly, Shuru Emiya. Devils? Wait, as in the actual devils, ones with wings, pitchforks and going around tempting people into giving up their souls and damning them to the 7 levels of hell, those devils. But they were supposed to be fictional characters, and even if they were real, they should not be looking like girls who walk straight out of a modeling magazine? Then again, it could explain the bit on temptation if they did look that way. But if what she said was true, and there were devils out and about in the human world, that would mean that all the scents at the school belonged to devils, and that would mean. I see. So you too as well? I turned slowly to face Sona and Tsubaki, to see them flinch slightly at the possible expression that was on my face. Hardly a surprise, when one finds out that some of their closest relations were devils who preyed on human souls. Kusaka-san and Tomo-san. Sona closed her eyes as she nodded slowly, clearly pained at giving me an answer. I decided that such matters would be dealt with later and settled for the more immediate issue. What are you going to do to him? I took a deep breath to calm my nerves and asked Rias again. Because right now, I am half tempted to blow your asses to Kingdom Come, and I will not stand by if you are planning to make him hurt people. Ah, that you do not need to worry. Rias stepped forward confidently with Akeno following and keeping an eye on me. Right now, he is currently healing using my evil pieces. He should be healed soon, and I'm not planning to make him hurt anyone. That will be my word as a Gremory. Is there really no way to save him, apart from these evil pieces? I glanced at Issei again and quickly used structural analysis on his body. It was faint, but I could detect at least 8 objects in his body that was emitting the same feeling as the woman in front of me. Afraid not, he was already half dead by the time we came, and we did answer his call to be saved. She pointed to the pieces of paper with the occult circles. The only way to save his life and pay off his debt was to become a servant of my peerage. I closed my eyes to think through of the information I have just heard. This was really getting out of hand, but that's what I get after relaxing for a few months. My life would always get back to the battlefield in the most outrageous manner. Now what are we to do with you? Rias tapped her chin thoughtfully. You know about us, and we have seen a sample of what you can do. I dare say that we are very interested in your lifestyle. I ignored her as I checked my surroundings. This was a little problematic for me, and the biggest question was whether I could get Issei to safety and reverse whatever they did to him. I won't do that if I were you. Rias said as though she guessed my thoughts. I will say this. You can't interrupt the process now, otherwise he would die. At the least, he can be alive, just not a human anymore. I looked again at Issei while keeping a close watch on those 4 girls. Issei was still having a hard time breathing due to the massive wound in his chest, and though he was healing quickly, it still was a slow process to me. Wordlessly, I drew in the air a rune above Issei before muttering, Hellbreed. Almost immediately, his breathing became lighter and his wound started to heal faster. I was still a little uncertain of the situation, but for the time being, the boy was safe. And as much as I hate to leave this in uncertain territory, I will have to trust her words. Fine, I will leave the boy to you. I leveled my blade at them. But I am expecting some answers soon, and I want you to promise that you do nothing that could jeopardize his humanity further, got that? After seeing their nods, I slowly walked away from them, before taking a peek at the feathers on the floor. I went to pick up the ones left by the winged harpy, and after taking a quick slice at the dismembered flesh, I placed them both in a glass flask that I conjured up and stored them in the dimensional pocket, all the while keeping close attention to the 4. On their part, they seemed curious as to my actions but made no comment on it. Well, I'll be leaving now. I stepped backwards as I silently drew a sign behind my back to cast an invisibility spell. I might as well leave an impression on them. See you in school later, and make sure Issei is safe. With that, I completely blended into the shadows and took off running, making sure to make tight corners to throw any familiars after me. This was going to be a long week. Well, that went well. Tsubaki remarked as they watched Shuru disappear into the night. This is a lot to take in. Sona rubbed her temple as she recalled what had transpired. It was one thing for Shuru to be a wizard, but it was another thing entirely for him to be physically capable of taking on 2 fallen angels at the same time and decimate one of them completely. What was also puzzling was the type of magic Shuru was using. She could not fathom what spells involved conjuring swords out of thin air, and yet she knew it could not be a sacred gear because of the mere feeling exuded from them. There were no other gears that could exude such a feeling of grandeur besides the supposed Longinus, but she had made sure that Shuru had no sacred gear on him. What I want to know is why there were 2 fallen angels in the area, and why they attacked him. Tsubaki motioned to Issei. Sona grimaced as she thought of the amount of paperwork involved for this incident. It was a very delicate situation. Considering that the fallen angels were in their jurisdiction wreaking havoc, there was going to be a lot of questions needing answers as to why they were doing so under their noses. The worst thing to her now was to somehow explain to the others that Shuru was a wizard who had found out about them, and may now be an enemy. She could not bear to think about Reia's and Tomo's reactions. That expression on his face tore at her soul more deeply than she had anticipated, and she did not want them to experience the same thing. This is a very interesting development, Rias remarked as she tended to Issei. The boy here seems to have a power that took up all of my pawn pieces, while Shuru is a wizard who could take on fallen angels with ease. Rias surveyed the fight zone with an analytic eye and a glint in her eye. He has great battle experience and a magic that we do not know of. Good speed and reactions as well. Sona could tell at a glance what Rias was thinking and decided to head her off. Before you even go there, need I remind you that Shuru has a bit of trust issues towards us considering that we have been watching the fight without helping him out in terms of protecting that boy. Also, he seems to have had the same idea as us in terms of surveillance on unknown factors, so he is already wary of us. We should not do anything else that could worsen the situation. Oh Sona, I know that. Rias pouted before giving a devious smile. Then again, you were also thinking the same thing as me, weren't you? Sona turned her head to face the devastation to prevent Rias seeing her discomfort. She would not deny that Shuru possessed an unusual ability and great physical prowess that allowed him to handle fights easily. So if coupled with either a knight or bishop piece, he could easily overwhelm anyone in the rating game. But that was if he agreed to be in a peerage in the first place. Part 2. I believe Archer was to blame for this predicament. For all I know, he could be abusing his higher authority as a counter-guardian to send trouble my way, and just sit back to watch me burn in agony. All while having that ever-sickening smirk of his. My few months of relative peace and relaxation were put to an abrupt stop when Kuo Academy's #1 pervert got speared to death by his date who was not a human, and I ended up fighting her and killing her comrade. Then under my nose, he got revived by one of the most seductive creatures I have seen to date to be her minion of sorts, and thus I introduced myself to 4 of the creatures of the town who apparently called themselves devils. Yup, just me, my regular supernatural encounters and my usual E-rank luck. After that encounter, I had spent the first few hours of the night tracking down that Rainier girl in hopes of taking her down on the spot. But she had a head start getting away from me, and for whatever reason, I could no longer detect her scent as earlier. That would mean she had hidden herself behind some ward, and I was not willing to spend the remainder of the night finding her and be unprepared for whatever she had planned. So I had no choice but to head back home, increase the number of protection spells, before hunkering in for a few hours of sleep, then head off to school. Honestly, being a teenager again sucks when you had to meet a monthly quota of attendance. In any case, now that I have been exposed to devils and vice versa, that meant they would need to decide on the methods to approach me. In my line of experience, this boiled down into 2 options. The first option was one I had too much experience with, mainly the opponents attacking me head-on or ambushing me in an attempt to kill me. This offers the most amount of success and ensures the target does not become a liability in the future. But considering what I have seen so far, I would say the second option was more preferable, sending in a representative to make contact and possibly recruit me. That only begged the question of whom will be sent to seek me out. Considering I have met most of the student council and I knew Sona's watchfulness over them, it was clear she would not let them meet me so soon. That left Rias's group whom I have yet to meet in person. And considering the reactions I kept getting from her and her pony-tailed partner, that would have left the other unknown members. So that would mean they would probably use the honey trap approach with the other girls, considering all I have seen were beautiful women in both groups. Kya. Kiba-kun. Kiba-sama. Or they would use the pretty boy approach. Said pretty boy who just entered my classroom amidst the sea of squealing girls was the Academy's #1 popular male of the lot. Kiba Yuto was a young man with pale skin, blonde hair and gray eyes, with a small beauty mole under his left eye. His appearance coupled with manners befitting that of a knight appealed to the girls greatly, and apparently he was the reason for the phrase, "damn handsome," that I kept hearing for the past few months. I also learned a few months back that he was also part of the same group as Rias, and since I did not have any reason to seek him out or the desire to mingle with them, I did not interact with him at all. At least until now. "Emma Yashuru?" he asked as he came to my table. "My name is Kiba Yuto. I have been asked by Rias Gremory Senpei to accompany you to see her in Kaichu. Please come with me." Eehhhhh. All the students in the classroom and outside of the corridor exclaimed loudly at the news, and the reactions after that were mixed between the 2 sexes. Damn it. The 2 of them have finally met. There is no hope for us now. Now Emiya is going to meet the Oni-samas, damn handsome. He already interacted with the student council, now he is going for the occult club girls. Damn that guy. The males were angrily complaining while throwing dark looks at the both of us. But they were nothing compared to the reactions from the females whom I was starting to feel a little haunted by. Kya. Kiba-kun and Emiya-kun together, it is a dream come true. Kiba's gentlemanly manner, and Emiya-kun's manly body and attitude. The Kiba x Emiya pair has finally been born. I have no regrets. Where is my camera? I need to record this moment quickly. The girls closest to us were swooning at our interaction while the ones further behind were looking at us with the type of dazed eyes that seriously made me question my safety in this world. I mean, these girls were worse than the ones back at the association, and they were really questionable in their behavior. Lead the way. I grabbed my lunch from the table and stood up to follow Kiba. Hopefully we can get away from this lot in one piece. So, this happens to you every single time? I asked in a slightly flat tone as we made our way up the stairs towards the level where the student council was situated. Ha ha ha. Kiba let out a somewhat polite but rueful laugh while scratching his cheek. I don't blame him for such an expression. I mean, how the heck anyone can handle so many girls swooning over him in such a manner for a long time? The nobles back home could do so since they grew up with the attention since birth. But this was high school, damn it. I found myself pitying Rin when we were both in high school. Here we are. Kiba opened the door and motioned to let me in, which I did so after a moment's hesitation. There was always the danger of being in an enemy's territory. One never knows what they had in store for you after you found out their secrets. The first thing I noted was the arrangement of the room seemed to have changed slightly, with the tables moved closer to the walls to allow more chairs in the room. On my left, the few members of the student council were seated in a somewhat somber manner. I kept my expression passive as I looked at Rhea and Tomo, who were looking at me with an expression of regret mixed with slight fear. Tsubaki was seated nearest to Sona's desk and was looking at me attentively. Then a few meters away from them was at least one other member I had met so far. With white hair that extended to her shoulders and a modest figure, Momo Hanakai was a girl whose appearance stood out quite vividly and her demeanor seemed to appeal to the males. I on the other hand was slightly wary of her, because the few hints of her attitude I have seen in her appearance reminded me a little too much of a certain someone back home. On my right side, there were fewer chairs and the mood was decidedly more upbeat. Akeno was seated closest to the president's table and waved a friendly hand at me. Seated next to her was a very small girl with white hair and a somewhat sleepy expression and had an unusual scent of a cat around her. She merely nodded in my direction before closing her eyes and dozing off silently. Bucko and Kaichu are currently in class dealing with other matters. Kiba explained as he shut the door and made his way to one of the chairs. They would be here shortly. If you want, you may have your lunch while we wait. I see. I inspected the chair that was presented to me before I sat down carefully. I was not feeling too hungry from the situation and I did not think that I should have my hands occupied with cutlery, so I had to make do with the small daifukus I made earlier. I had to at least have some energy if I got into a fight. I paused short of putting one in my mouth, sensing a strong stare in my direction. I turned and saw the little girl who was now wide awake and was looking at the daifuku in my hand. I alternated my attention between the two, before raising my hand above my head, watching her eyes locked on it while her head stood still. I brought my hand down, and her eyes followed suit. I moved my arm sideways and she still kept her eyes on it. Oh, despite the serious conversation that could potentially determine my fate later, I could not help but have a mischievous smile forming on my face as an imaginary Rin whispered into my ears words of mischief. It might be childish, but it was too good for me to pass up. I started to move my arm a little faster, in every possible direction I could think of, all the while her eyes keeping track of it without moving her head even once. It got to the point that my hand blurred from the speed I was going at, and her eyes were still able to keep up, right to the moment I abruptly halted in front of my hand. It was downright hilarious seeing such a reaction from her. It reminded me like a kid looking at a candy she wanted at a candy store. I chuckled as I put forth the daifuku in my hand. You want one? She looked at me for a while before nodding. I lightly threw it to her, wondering how devils would react to my cooking. She looked at it tentatively as though to check if it were poison. Then with a gesture that suggested she was content with her checks, she opened her mouth to reveal small fangs and took a small bite of it. Her reaction was rather interesting, in the form of her eyes widening and two tufts of hair standing upright like cat ears. Then just as quickly, the daifuku vanished from her hand completely. Damn, she could give Saber a run for speed eating. Is it good? Yes. She gave her answer while looking at the bag of daifukus with a hint of longing in her eyes. Feeling slightly amused at her expression, I removed two more from the bag, before handing the remainder to her. Here, you can have them. She took the bag slowly, before handing them out one at a time to the others and hanging on to the rest. Kaneko-chan, don't forget to leave some for Sona and Rias. Akeno reminded her gently, and after a moment, the little girl reluctantly removed two more to be placed aside, before tackling the remainder on her own, which made one of my eyebrows go up in amazement. I mean, sure, she enjoyed my cooking, but could she really tackle that number of daifukus? I made a little too much and had planned to save some for later. But was she really planning to finish the remaining 20? So good. I turned to see Tomo with an extremely ecstatic expression after she took a bite of the one in her hand. The others showed similar expressions as hers with varying differences. Tsubaki looked torn between blissful and serious. Rhea and Momo were looking at their daifukus with stars in their eyes. Kiba was still gentlemanly in his praise by simple nods, and for Akano, well, for whatever reason, the scent of leather was overriding the scent of burned ozone, and it was really making me feel uneasy at her gaze and blushing of her cheeks. Further thoughts were put on hold when the door opened and the last two additions to the meeting came in. Oh my! Rias blinked as she looked at everyone's expression. Something good must have happened. Ah, Kaichu. Tsubaki stammered as she alternated her sights between her and the daifuku in her hand. This is not what it looks like. Emiya offered some to her and she gave some to us and we took it and… Here. Kaneko raised the plate with the remaining two daifukus left for them. The two looked at each other before taking them, pausing to check for any poison or spells before they took a bite. Their reactions were quite amusing to me. Rias went red in the face and placed a hand on her cheek as she looked at the daifuku with a very blissful expression, and Sona actually let out a light moan before she clamped her mouth tight with her hand. I for one was a little surprised at that type of reaction from her. Damn it, I should have took out my camera phone to capture that moment. Whoa, Sona. Rias let out an amused tone as she turned to her. I know that this is good, but to have this type of reaction from taking a bite, I think your fans would be downright shocked. Sona coughed softly while having a light blush on her face. I assume you made this Emiya-kun? She turned to me with an expression that was decidedly stoic, ruined somewhat by the deep blush in her reaction from earlier. I simply nodded and pointed to the bag of daifukus that Kaneko was demolishing at an alarming rate. She evidently liked my food, so I just handed it over. At least I still have my bento, otherwise this would be problematic. I see. Sona looked at the daifuku in her hand with a cute and complicated expression, as though torn between eating it now, otherwise saving it to eat later. Then with a sigh, she finished off the remainder and made her way to her seat, focusing her attention on me. Looks like it was time. Shuru Emiya. She began as Rias took her seat next to her. It has come to our attention that you are a wizard in our jurisdiction, and considering your battle prowess and your encounters with the individuals from last night, we would like to have a discussion regarding your stay here. Alright, but before we continue, I wish to inquire one thing. I held up a finger to stop them as I turned to Rias. Depending on your answers, this conversation could go either way, so tell me truthfully, what have you done with the kid? Oh, you mean Hyodo-kun? Rias mused as she smiled at me. I was under the impression that you don't talk to each other that much, considering the many attempts you have stopped him from peeping in the kendo club's changing room. That may be the case, but until yesterday he was a human being, and that meant someone whom I should be protecting from knowing the creatures from the other side. I replied back ambiguously. And the fact that a few creatures of said side apparently ignored the fighting that was ensuing, and decided to turn a helpless person into one of their own on his deathbed, is something which I am having a lot of trust issues with. Hey, I might sound cruel, but that was the truth. Ah, if that is the case, then you need not worry. Rias replied coolly without missing a beat. He has been healed and I am not making do anything that would jeopardize his humanity. In fact, I just spotted him going to the kendo club's changing room with his buddies. Yup, he must be fine if he was going to peek into the changing room after getting stabbed the night before. A sigh escaped my mouth as I rubbed my temple to ease the slight headache, pausing to look at Sona who was apparently doing the same thing as me. We both looked at each other for a moment before hanging our heads and sighing again. Yes, Issei was about to become a general pain in the ass. Alright, since he is safe, I guess I can now listen to this discussion. I just shook my head and leaned back to hear them. So what is your verdict? We would like to ask you to join us as a member of either one of our peerages. Sona promptly said it after her mini exasperation fit. That definitely changed the mood in the room, as the girls from her group looked a lot more serious at her suggestion, while Rias's faction seemed a little subdued. Kaichu, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you sure? Rhea asked while peeking glances at me. I am very certain about the choice. Sona replied while gesturing with a hand. Emiya-kun has quite a proficiency in fighting, and has more than enough capability to take on two Fallen at the same time. Fallen? I blinked at her while thinking back about the opponents I faced. So that's the name of Reinare's species, huh? As in the two you fought. Sona turned to me with a light frown. while Rias was looking at me with the same curious expression as that night. Emiya-kun, by chance you did not know they were fallen angels? For a moment there was silence, then I opened my mouth. What? Seriously, you didn't know whom you were fighting? Rias mused as she studied me even more while letting out a thoughtful smile. How intriguing. Sona ignored her comment as she focused her attention on me. Emiya-kun, do you really not know that you fought off 2 agents of the fallen faction without understanding their identities? Okay, before we go any further, can I just confirm something? I held up a hand to steady my head from the implications of her question. When you are talking about fallen angels, you are referring to the ones who fall from grace and forever exiled by the big guy up there? I motioned with my finger upwards to get the point. That would be the typical version from most literature. Rhea replied as everyone was now giving their attention to me. Emiya-kun, you are looking a little unsteady. Are you okay? Okay. I got the feeling that Zelrech and Archer were laughing their asses off right now. They must have joined forces to torment me for my lack of action for the past few months by throwing me some major curveballs. Damn them. Okay, time for some damage control. It was